organized since everybody started.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this public hearing of the Commission on Government Efficiency. My name is Patrick Gaspard, and I am honored to chair this commission. We're here today because New Yorkers deserve and need a government of the possible, one that can urgently build infrastructure, promote small business growth and development, and make the city more livable for all, particularly those who need access to affordable childcare, affordable housing, affordable groceries, and all of the essential services that this city provides. The task that we're going to undertake as a commission is a top to bottom review of the entire New York City Charter to build a 21st century government that New Yorkers need. Only if voters agree with the recommendations that surface from this commission and from your best ideas, only if they agree to ballot referendums in November can those changes go into the charter and into effect with full force of the law. I know that I speak for my fellow commissioners when I say that we're committed to hearing from a broad cross-section of New Yorkers and to pursue the best ideas we can find. This hearing is one of many public hearings which will be held across every borough to hear ideas from experts, community leaders, public servants, and any member of the public who wishes to testify. Importantly, this is an independent commission. In making our recommendations to city voters, we are bound by our judgments and our shared and collective values. We'll pursue ideas irrespective of who proposed them and regardless of who supports them. Joining me in this task are 14 outstanding commissioners who care a great deal about this city. Vice Chair Emma Wolf, Secretary Susan Kang, Marco Carrion, Kapil Longani, Ruth Messenger, Dawn Pinnock, Esther Rosario, Mark Shaw, Barika Williams, Kathy Wild. Joining us virtually this evening is Anna Oliveira. Joining us in person, Henry Garrido. And absent this evening are Theodore Moore and Carlina Rivera. Although, as I said, we'll be considering the entire charter, the commission is looking in particular at the processes and procedures built into the charter that could be updated to deliver a more efficient government that serves New Yorkers with excellence. Today, we're focusing on modernizing government and streamlining government technology. New Yorkers need a 21st century government that can truly keep pace with the needs and the technological changes that are occurring. We must be thoughtful about how we use that technology to deliver the best services, which in turn increases trust in governance. Our tech infrastructure can support or impede our ability to provide equitable access to government, and it's important that we harness that potential for its good. Ultimately, we would be hard-pressed to find a government that isn't impacted by technology, and so we're really looking forward to the inputs that we receive from all of you tonight. All of that said, we welcome testimony on all topics. That we're focused on this theme of modernization and on government technology, and we will generally front-load speakers focused on that theme while still working to ensure that we cover the diversity of ideas and hear from as many New Yorkers as possible. I will tell you that my fellow commissioners and I have really been having a blast the last few days, and not just because of the Knicks. Two days ago, we had the first commission hearing in Manhattan. Last night, it was followed by a meeting in the Bronx. Thus far, over 350 New Yorkers, not counting all of you this evening, have joined us for these hearings. 140 of them have submitted testimony to that commission. We have all of you who are here in person this evening, and we have many other fellow New Yorkers that are joining us online. I want to give you some sense of how we're going to organize the dialogue. For members of the public, tonight we'll hear first from those of you who are in this room, and then as we can, we are also going to cycle in those who are joining us virtually. We will call to testify from 2 attendees in the room at a time, followed by any questions from the commission. I intend to call on 5 pairings from the room, and then I'll turn to get input from 2 online participants, and we'll continue in that fashion until we reach 8 p.m. tonight. Should you be here still at 8, and if you haven't had a chance to testify, but you'd like to testify, you'll have the ability to submit your testimony to the record. I will ask all of you, if you're in the room or online, to heed the clock. You have 3 minutes to make your presentation. I will not allow you to go over that 3 minutes. I'm going to encourage all of you to do the thing that our teachers taught us to do when we were in school. If somebody has already made a point or already asked a question that is part of your testimony, I'll ask you to take the opportunity to self-edit and to go through your testimony again, decide whether you feel as if the point's already been made, and if you want to address other aspects that you want to bring to the commission, or if you want to expound on something that's already surfaced in the room. So it's going to be 3 minutes, and we'll keep to that. If you wish to testify virtually, please raise your hands in Zoom, and we'll call on you in order. When your name is called, your name on Zoom must be your full name, and you must have your camera on. Otherwise, we will skip to the next person. We'll do our best, as I said, to hear from everyone if we can, but we will conclude at 8 p.m. You can also, as I said, submit your written testimony on our website. With that, I'd like to get to the testimony. And I would love to call on the very first participants this evening, if you give me 1 second. Okay, so again, I will call on 5 pairs in the room. That's 10 altogether to testify, 2 at a time, and then I'll move to those who are online. Our first 2 participants are Margaret Brown and Jessica Ariel. Jessica, forgive me, but your name is hyphenated, so I know that there's some part of your name that's been eliminated on my screen. Please join us, Jessica.
Mr. Chair, before Jess Wamala speaks, I just would like the panel and the audience to know that she is my granddaughter.
Thank you, Commissioner. I suppose this means that you will not have a chance to ask any questions of her, but you're beaming with a pride that's evident to all.
Do we go, or what do we do? Okay.
You have the mic.
Okay, so and I have 3 minutes. Okay,
Yes.
so one of my favorite professors in grad school, Uwe Reinhardt, he said that efficiency is not an end in itself. It's important to define our goals and values first. So I'd like to say that the values that I'd like to espouse are transparency, civic engagement, democratization of information, and sustainability, and also economic opportunity for all New Yorkers. So I should say I am a city employee at a mayoral agency. And sometimes it seems like AI is the elephant in the room, and we haven't really embraced it as a tool. But city government, I think, has very good reasons not to embrace AI without asking serious questions first in our operations. There's major issues with data security, teaching these models for free. Do we want to do that? And if AI is used to replace people in our workforce, that's a serious problem. But there's other possibilities I think that AI offers beyond just replacing human labor. And there's some really exciting things that are going on, like in the city of Boston, that I think will be really worthwhile to look into. I see nods. That's great. So they've developed it's called a model context protocol, or an MCP server. So it's basically a software layer that allows an AI model to securely interact with data sources. And they're using the city's open data first because it's public anyway, just to as a like beta testing kind of sandbox way to start out with it. There are problems with when people try to access city data. There's mistakes, hallucinations that the AI does. And it's really important that people get accurate information. So in addition to this MCP server, there's also open source agents that that the city of Boston has made available that can basically be used by residents to ask questions in plain language of the city's open data, and they get formatted tables and results that they don't have to have major software skills to be able to understand and have access to this information. And I think this is exciting. It opens the door to much broader access to open data, and it helps us attain a new level of civic engagement and participation, hopefully. So I had other things to say, but I'm going to stop with that.
Thank you so much, Jordan, both for modeling, test. Oh, did I?
I'm
Sorry. Apologies.
no problem.
But thank you for modeling that behavior. And thank you for giving us specific examples from a city that we can now go and conduct some research on. Please, Jessica.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission on Government Efficiency, and to the people of New York City. My name is Jessica Ariel Wamala, and while I myself have roots from outside the city, New York is where my wife and I call home. Her mother called home, and her mother's mother still calls home. I gave birth to a daughter whose birth certificate reads, location of birth, northbound on 10th Avenue between 39th and 40th. And so as a proud homeowner in Crown Heights and a small business owner here in the city called The Future Fluent, and a systems architect who actually spent the last 6 years from 2020 to 2026 building this very infrastructure that proves government can indeed work as hard and with as much love as the people it serves. I have a very long explanation, and I already handed it to your staff, so I'm trying to take the summary points, but you do have the full explanation already with your staff. Every morning I drive my daughter to 3K and I look out the window at the corner of Atlantic and Vanderbilt, and I see the visceral reality to New York's administrative friction. There's a line there every single morning of about 100 of my neighbors wrapped around the corner, clutching weather-worn paper files because it's the only proof of their existence to the state. And they're waiting for the HRA office to open. But as they wait, there becomes a long line, and so I end up sitting in traffic. And so the sitting in traffic becomes a monument to this inefficiency every single day. And the tiny things that ensure people get into that line are like my neighbor Tasha, where she has to take a lunch rush at 2 p.m., which is the same time as her SNAP appointment. So she now has to miss her SNAP interview and gets a cold mail that you all spend as a city to tell her she no longer has SNAP EBT for that month. That cascades, that tiny little administrative friction, because she wanted to work and pick up an extra shift, cascades into a month long of physical hunger, watering down her own baby formula, and skipping dinner. And so when I say that line is not an accident, I mean it's a physical monument to when we believe government has scarce resources. Last year, I went on open source, hundreds of thousands of these cases, 300,000 to be exact, pinballed between closed and reopened for HRA due to preventable codes called error work or missed phone calls. And those folks did not have their eligibility changed. They're still eligible for SNAP. So I think that experience just shines a really specific light on what it looks like when we don't embrace a lot of the new technology. My dear friend here did a lot of that explanation, so I'm going to skip over all the fun bits. But I think what's important is we have to listen to folks like Ezra Klein, a hometown favorite. We must stop defining AI solely by the risks and fear. And we need to start defining AI by what we hope these technologies can achieve for public good. And I can demystify the machine. When I worked for Promise, this organization, I applied basic principles of design. Be a coach. Tell someone if their date is not due, if it's out of bounds, if it needs to be within 30 days. Tell them before they submit it. Things like that. This approach is battle tested. We were able to distribute energy credits here in New York. This whole room should go to nyeeap.com to get your energy credit off of your Con Ed or National Grid bill, and you'll see that AI in action. In Detroit, we worked with water bill assistance, and in Baltimore, we've done property tax payment plans, and in Mississippi, we run the entire SNAP program. So I just do believe we can think more positively and more hopeful about what's possible when you use technology.
Thank you both for that testimony. Jessica, I'm gonna jump in and say I know that you've already submitted comprehensive testimony, which demonstrates that you have the same rigorous commitment to the details as your grandmother. going to ask you if you might want to lift up any specific examples of areas in the work that has led to transformation in the lives of average folk and some real savings for municipalities. You just mentioned the work you're doing in Mississippi. I just came back from spending some time in Mississippi, and it's been interesting to see how, despite their reputation, there are many ways that they were leapfrogging as a consequence of how they're using the technology. So I wonder if you might share any of that.
Absolutely. I'll give two examples really quickly. In the state of Mississippi, where the SNAP infrastructure takes a proactive approach, folks need to remain compliant. 57% of the people we texted last month did not even know what they had to do to remain compliant. So that means when they're re-upped for their benefits, they have already been out of compliance for 4 months, so they get sanctioned. So the technology is a proactive text message that says, hey, you fall in this status in the code. Based on that status, you need to show this type of proof, and you need to do it every month. Maybe it's 80 hours working. Maybe it's a proof around you claimed to be on some sort of student program, so you have to show now proof of student. And AI can read those forms. It can say, hey, it actually looks like you fat fingered. That's a picture of a cat. I'm so sorry, you don't want to submit that. Or, oh my gosh, we actually need John Smith. We don't need Jill Smith. You accidentally uploaded your wife's W-2. We actually need the homeowner, the person whose name is on the utility bill. That level of precision, that level of document completeness is what really good AI looks like. And it's something that takes all of that off of the resident. The resident doesn't have to fumble through all the policy. The system can be smart enough and it can be adjudicated in a way that says, that is a simple yes, no, that is math, or no, that needs to go to a caseworker. And so the other statistic in Mississippi is 75% of cases got processed faster because people submitted their documents better right away. So caseworkers took 3 days to do an average case in SNAP rather than 12 days. So imagine the amount of savings for that department.
Fantastic examples. Questions for both of our witnesses from commissioners. Henry, I see your hand up. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Obviously, some of the cases that you mentioned in Mississippi don't compare to the volume as scale. Something like New York, where we're processing almost 20 times the amount of people in SNAP. So part of the problem we have is we have to contend with things that are under control of the city charter. Some of the stuff that you're mentioning are federal and state regulations on SNAP. But I'm wondering about something you said. I think your name was Margaret.
Yes.
Was that your name?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. About the city of Boston utilizing a methodology to make sure that AI doesn't sort of control or takes over the data. And that's kind of the big challenge. And I think it's a question for the two of you. Understanding that AI could be used as a tool, what are sort of the boundaries that you think ought to be done in an area that is completely unregulated to some extent and is scary to many people because of the taking of personal information? Where is the line? Where is that discernible line in your view?
I have a very discernible line. I fundamentally believe humans are not great at repetitive arithmetic and machines are excellent at arithmetic. Generative AI is horrible at strategic decision-making, and that should be left to the caseworkers who are compassionate and have been trained to do this and are skilled at this. And so it's a matter of being able to be specific. An if-else statement is a beautiful thing. In traditional machine learning, the models are tuned to say all errors are symmetric. And I think the most important thing is to really understand machine learning. Area under the precision recall curve weights all errors, false positives, false negatives equally. But if the system makes a false negative mistake, which means you wrongly reject something because the software wasn't recognized it can always go to a secondary queue, right? If you say, hey, like the secondary queue can be a human. But if you say, hey, actually, AI thinks this is a bad document, I'm rejecting you, that person will literally not get SNAP. So in my mind, the type of bureaucracy I want, the type of inefficiency I want is those amazing caseworkers that have been there for 14 years and have seen every case under the sun. We don't need to train our AI on that. We need to actually say, if AI can confidently say yes, because AI can say, I've collected all the documents I need, I triage, I know exactly what I need from this family, I have the head of household, I have the number of households, I have all of their identity documents, I have all of their utility documents. Now I need to do basic math. That is not, that's not generative AI. That is COBOL We still have that. That is the mainframe. That is still the same thing. So it's a matter of using the right technology for the right problem. We don't need a Ferrari for some of this stuff. We really don't.
Okay, so,
After Margaret.
is that, should I go?
Yes, please, please.
Thanks. So the model context protocol that's called MCP that Boston developed, that keeps basically keeps AI from misinforming people. And it also allows like AI is kind of a month, it takes like a month for them to get a lot of information. And so another thing that it does is it allows people to use live data. And it's like an intermediary kind of tool that's plugged in to their open data, their city open data, and makes it easier for, first of all, makes the data live, makes it more accurate. And then they have additional open source, which they're trying to encourage other cities to use, agents that make it easier. So people don't have to know how to like download data sets into Excel, open them and analyze them. They don't need data analysts. Anybody has civic concerns and is concerned about issues and wants to know information can use this information. But I would say I would encourage New York. I think that New York is capable of a lot of things that entire countries would like to be capable of. And I often think that we just don't think big enough in this country anymore. Like we don't have like a moonshot. And one thing I heard a council member, Julie Wan, talking about this recently, that it's not out of the question for New York to have its own AI. Like we don't use corporate AI. We're not using these data centers that are so harmful to the environment, and we don't teach their models. We have our own thing. Like, I think that is like, I would love to see that. There needs to be, I mean, I'm talking big here, big dreams, but like, if everybody in the city had access to cheap or free high-speed internet, if everybody, all the kids who going to New York City public schools had access to low-cost devices that they could learn on, and we have workforce development, and we have already city agencies that within DCAS we have energy management, and they're creating these sustainable energy solutions everywhere, and I just see the potential for like a really non-dystopian version of the AI future, where we're harnessing it, for our needs.
Thank you. I want to move to Dawn and Kapil.
Okay.
Very quick questions for you, Jessica. So with the savings that you quoted, I know you talked about 75,000 for the Mississippi SNAP program. Was a portion of those savings attributed to displacement of staff? Or are you suggesting that, okay, 75% quicker, completion rate was higher, but it allowed us to better utilize the talents of staff so that we are having them do what they were hired to do?
Exactly. Job satisfaction went up. And in fact, Mississippi reported 2 hours were saved per caseworker per week, which meant those 2 hours went to do the things that they could actually do. I was in Mississippi many times during these projects, and one of these caseworkers told me that she had 2 stamps left. So she had to adjudicate in the room. So a room full of people that were on her caseload. She had to decide who was going to get mail their notification. So that's the type of thing that if you lower kind of all of the things that she shouldn't be doing, and she can actually spend time now on the things that are harder. And I will say to what all of the things she said, those are battle tested ideas. Those aren't crazy, they're out there ideas. Those are things that already exist. This state right now has used over 25,000 people have received benefits, a discount off of their energy bill through the New York Enhanced Energy Assistance Program. The Public Commission in July, they made a regulation that said the utilities of New York, the state of New York, need to come together to make it easier to just to survive the rising increase of bills. And they hired Promise. Promise went through an RFP process, and my company, and I don't work for them anymore, they won, but they won because we were able to stand up the program in 30 days. The contract was signed in October. It went live in January, and already I think Staten Island and like Central Brooklyn has received the most, which just shows you they're the people who are kind of that missed middle. They're $1 above an income over regular EAP, which means low income. If you're on SNAP, you do qualify automatically for EAP. But this group right above, if you make $1, but the cost of living is still Staten Island, it's still here in New York City, it's still expensive. And so 60% of the people in that first month qualified and within 5 business days, which means within 5 business days, you got all your information in and all of it was adjudicated. The caseworkers were able to go through all of your information. So that's why I encourage everyone in here,
Understood.
if you're eligible,
Understood.
you'll find out right away. NYEAP.com.
Thank you. I'm going to get Kapil.
Equity is a theme that runs through the charter. And I'm curious on this MCP that you've been talking about, how does it deal with that?
That's a great question. The way I think about navigating AI bias is really going to be thinking about where is the program policy, like what is the policy and what are the jurisdiction's rules, and then making sure AI, you're training it on metrics that are going to optimize for outcomes that allow for easy outcomes to be yes, middle outcomes to be human. So it's like we want to be transparent. All the ones that are going to only AI, or if AI is the adjudicator, if it's not going through human, as a human QAing, and are you ensuring that the system underneath that's learning, because generative AI is a model that gets stronger and stronger, are you ensuring that you built qualitative systems that actually improve that? And in theory, your AI should actually get to be able to take over more complex cases that it couldn't handle before, because you had humans do it over and over again, and then humans were like, actually, no, this becomes more black and white. The AI can take the black and white cases. And I think we have to really highlight that there's a yes, and then there's the need more documents category. A lot of these things we're talking about, are the human who's interacting with the other human, the caseworker, just needs more information before they can make a decision. So it's that waiting time that we're saving.
Margaret, Jessica, thank you so much for your testimony. There's obviously a lot of interest in this, and I know that you've both submitted additional information for us to consume. So thank you both.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
If I haven't submitted additional information yet, would I have an opportunity to do?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Staff who are here can direct you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for allowing us to testify today. Wonderful hearing.
Thank you for caring enough about your fellow New Yorkers to take this time. Carl Hammersberg and Andrew Ryan are our next. We invite you up to testify.
How you doing? Want to go first? Yeah. Sure. I'm in the chair on the right. All right. Or from their perspective on the left. Well, thank you. Well said. Chair Gaspard and members of the commission, I'm Carl Hammersberg with SAS. We're an existing trusted partner of the city. Topic of modernizing government and streamlining government technology is a crucial one for all citizens of New York, which we very much heard from the first round of testimony and questions. Within that broader topic, utilizing data to proactively address citizen needs, gaps, and risks should be considered. Even as systems are modernized over time, breaking down the silos today can reap immediate impact when undertaken with thoughtfulness. Proper oversight and governance, one of the key topics that already came up, must be part of the foundation of this approach, but government is more effective when it does share within itself and keeps the goal of improving citizen outcomes in mind. Coming back to the previous points around like starting with open data, starting with lower risk data, and then getting to those greater outcomes so that you're ensuring the right methodology. One opportunity to follow this path in a manner that's lower risk due to the data involved is to look at procurement. And that was a topic that came up at the end of your initial meeting back on June 4th. And I know that ultimately you're looking at the charter, you're going to take a look at recommendations around procurement processes, potentially general oversight. But there can still be places that are either restrained today or that need to be enabled around the significant opportunity in viewing the full procurement and vendor ecosystem holistically, looking for both risks and opportunities. That doesn't mean one central place, it means looking at it holistically. Government, like other organizations of any size, ends up with a broad ecosystem of contractors and suppliers providing goods and services. Vetting processes vary and typically are only performed at onboarding. ERP systems are trusted with the processes around invoices, purchase orders, and payments while approvals are set in place. But all of that assumes that the data is accurate The controls are airtight, and there aren't either accidental overpayments, intentional overbilling, collusion, or just wasteful duplicate spend. A single view of all vendors, regardless of where the underlying data or processes sit, can uncover duplicate invoices, inflated pricing compared to contract terms, and places where there may be vendor-to-vendor or even employee-to-vendor collusion. It's an area typically overlooked within broader remits and processes left to periodic spot checks or audits. Setting up a system that aggregates this disparate data to provide continuous monitoring over procurement and vendors can highlight both risks and opportunities quickly. Just knowing that 5 different departments are doing business with the same company and potentially you could aggregate that contract and get a lower unit price can have a huge impact on spending. And uncovering bitter collusion that on average increases costs by 43% in any given bid could save tens of millions per instance. Governments and private organizations today regularly see massive savings by preventing complex duplicate invoicing.
Thank you so much, Carl. Andrew.
Good evening, Chair Gaspard and esteemed commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and for your service to New Yorkers. I'm Andrew Ryan, President of the Citizens Budget Commission. Before presenting specific recommendations, I do want to urge the commissioners to propose only changes appropriate to the charter, those that define the core powers, structures, and processes of government. Also, given the commission's short time, I urge you to focus on proposals that can be fully developed by the end of July, but please take this great input and set an agenda for future work. So tonight I offer 3 proposals that would underpin activities to modernize and improve the efficiency of government and 1 to strengthen the rainy day fund. First, we recommend to modify the charter to require the city to conduct a statistically valid representative resident feedback survey at least every 4 years. To respond to New Yorkers' needs and improve agency management, the city should use feedback from New Yorkers, the customers of city government. Everyone deserves a voice, and this survey would ensure that that feedback does not depend on having money, having power, or the time to attend a hearing such as this. The city should conduct and publish the survey with results at the community board level and disaggregated by race, ethnicity, and household income. This would allow residents to rate their quality of life, rate city services, and show where government is performing well and where improvements are needed. Second, require a comprehensive performance management system. While efforts exist in various agencies, New York does not have such a citywide performance management system to improve service quality and efficiency. Such a system would require both robust data and management review and accountability processes where leaders and managers and frontline workers review data, identify success and problems, track improvement, and solve and foster accountability. The charter should establish a framework. Third, improve the mayor's management report. The MMR has long been a useful mainstay of city government transparency, but it focuses too heavily on measures of what the city is doing rather than measures of how well the city is doing its work. That is, what are the outcomes? How high quality are the services? Are they efficient? The charter should require the MMR to include input, output, outcome, quality, and efficiency indicators for each agency and program. These proposals would not dictate management choices, but would establish the durable structures needed to modernize government and improve efficiency and quality. Finally, create rules to strengthen rainy day fund deposits, withdrawals, and balances. The current laws governing the use of the rainy day fund are inadequate. They don't mandate that deposits are made during the good times to help ensure the fund's balance is substantial enough to protect New Yorkers during a recession or emergency. And the rules also do not restrict withdrawals to such a recession or emergency. The charter should require that the mayor and the council enact a law that details the city's deposit withdrawal and target size policies. So thank you for the opportunity to testify. Be happy to answer any questions and provide specific charter language if you want to pursue this.
Thank you, Carl and Andrew. Commissioners, please.
Thank you, Andrew. A couple of questions on the survey. So are you talking about a statistical survey or a count, for clarification?
It should be a survey that asks New Yorkers to rate their quality of life in their neighborhood, the city services that they interact with generally, and why they love or don't love living here.
I guess I'm looking at, are we doing a poll or survey of what is supposed to be a statistically representative, but not an actual per person individual total count? Okay.
But it is a representative sample, but we would recommend a sample size sufficient enough so that we can go to the community level.
Okay. And then my second question is, whether or not you've considered at all how to, or if there would be a way to roll this into existing surveys and analysis. I know HPD's housing survey gets rolled into as a part of the annual census. So whether or not this would be a standalone or become a part of some of our existing census and statistics surveys that we already do as a city.
The most important thing is that it is statistically valid and representative and
That's-
covers the right areas. The city did it in 2018. We did it in 27, 23, and 25. If it could be rolled in, fine. I think sometimes we make things so big, they're harder.
Please, Henry.
Andrew, can you clarify a little more about the concept of a rainy day fund? Because the city has funds that have been established by state law. There's like the Rotary Trust Fund, which is separate and apart. Some are established by city council rules. Can you clarify what you mean by that?
We're specifically talking about what was established because of the Charter Revision Commission in 2019, where the voters established in state law, then put into the city charter as well. We do have, and the cities use workarounds, the Retiree Health Benefits Trust Fund, and that's been used by the Bloomberg administration, de Blasio administration as a de facto rainy day fund. Frankly, we think that should be saved to pay retiree health benefits, of which I am one. And so I think we should start to have money set aside for that $100 billion obligation. This rainy day fund right now has $2 billion in it, the statutorily and charter mandated fund. What it doesn't have is any rules requiring during the good times us putting money into the fund, because we know during the bad times, that's when we have to dramatically cut services. And who gets hurt most when we cut services? The most vulnerable New Yorkers. Let's protect them.
Okay. My second question relates to your proposal about procurement reform. Specifically, this is something that as commissioners we're looking into. And when in fact the role, say the PPB promulgating rules, as opposed to roles that are proposed to be in the charter that would affect the role and the functions of that PPB role. So you came up with some recommendations, but I'd like to figure out if there's a way that you can clarify whether you see that as a function that administratively the board can do, the agencies can implement, or the charter could mandate.
So I think it's honestly a combination of that. So I believe that part of it is stepping all the way back to the charter and saying, here is this centralized piece that at least provides oversight regardless of the role of the board. And I know that was one of the points you got into in the initial meeting, which is what takes precedence, this commission and the charter or the board? And the answer is the commission and the charter. So I think there's an opportunity there to not only look at the specific role of the board, but this idea of how do we take a look at procurement, vendors, suppliers, just that overall ecosystem at a central point so that we can understand exactly what's going on. You can determine both risk and opportunity there, and that type of thing can then generate huge amounts of savings, which then may cascade to other mandates or other changes over time. But until you start to get to that point of saying, we have to at least pull it together. Again, I'm not saying one place should rule it all. Sometimes organizations go to that, sometimes cities, states go to that, where they try to look at, oh, there's only one place. That can often bog down the ability to actually get the work done and to be able to contract for services. And that just gets in the way of trying to do what's right for citizens. But at least understanding that you can leave the parts in place that should be there in the places where they should be, closer to the work, but still say, we need to pull this together at a greater level that can create the opportunity for where there may actually be bad things going on. Now you suddenly have insights, but also you can truly understand exactly what's happening. Again, back to that point. Are we actually getting the services we contracted for? As we work with governments all around the world, that's one of the points is to say, they were only supposed to charge me this amount per hour for this type of stuff. At this point, we're getting invoices, we're paying them. Are we even going back to the contract? They were supposed to have performance metrics. Are we measuring those? How are we looking at this at a greater level? I think that is really a piece. I know that's one of your areas of interest. And I think that that's a piece that this commission could really look at to say, here's something we can put in charter, with the idea being we're setting a framework for this greater level of understanding and intelligence.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you.
Ruth?
I think that goes exactly, you made a quick reference when you were talking, Andrew, thank you for being exactly on time with 3 minutes, it was perfect. And when you made a point, when you were talking about procurement, about businesses, I think we're talking about businesses that have to deal with 6 different city agencies, and there's no no way to communicate that and share it. And that is clearly also the case for dramatically, not only for not-for-profits, but for individual clients that we were talking about previously, who have to file with 7 different agencies to get benefits to which they're entitled. There has to be ways of simplifying this. And I would just note, as an experience that all of us have, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But if you're in a health program here, all of your data is in the system. And if you get referred from one doctor to another and they start to ask you what drugs you take, you can just say it is in my portal and it's all there. And I really think that if the biggest health institutions in the city could do it, so could we.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It was the limitation on timing because ultimately that's where I think you should get to is this idea when we really understand citizens, it means if you interact with us once, what all do we know about you? And to say, you think you're asking for one thing, but you're eligible for 5 services. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leah Bannon and Jesse Fields, please join us. I love all the excited side meetings. New partnerships are being formed. It's great. Leah.
Hi,
Hello.
is it on? Can you hear me? Yes,
Is the green light on?
I think so, yeah. Okay,
Yes, we can hear you.
hi. My name is Leah Bannon, and I'm speaking only in a personal capacity tonight. I have experience as a federal contractor, as a government employee, and cross-agency advisor at 18F and the United States Digital Service, which was established by President Obama to fix big tech problems like healthcare.gov. I then stayed and accepted a position as a career civil servant. I testified tonight to encourage you to prioritize enabling agencies to hire small digital service teams who can coordinate with a centralized IT for shared service resources. I do not recommend large IT contracts if you hope to deliver efficient, quality public services. Even under the best circumstances, there is a pervasive and constant tax on efficiency and quality when contracting tech services due to their constant prioritization on business development. This arises in a myriad of ways I can speak to more in Q&A. As an alternative, in order to efficiently build excellent digital services the public wants, we have learned you need to start with small, empowered teams inside agencies. Agencies often ask the U.S. Digital Service to send engineers to help, but instead we sent small multidisciplinary teams of 6 to 8 experts in experience design, product strategy, legal or policy, as well as engineers, who partnered closely with expert civil servants and interviewed members of the public to map out the public's end-to-end experience trying to obtain and manage a government service and the underlying processes and systems civil servants use to deliver it. We use this service design approach to quickly identify the public's biggest pain points and the agency's biggest opportunities for efficient improvements, often in about a month. This also allows us to obviate whole sections of a process instead of endlessly fine-tuning and building on bad ones. The main lessons we've learned from this model are threefold. First, these teams are most successful when they are hired and work directly in the agency, building with and for the people who will use the solutions they develop. Second, they need to be able to rely on a centralized IT program that provides efficiencies of scale through shared services, infrastructure, practice area guidance, and quality check-ins. This helps provide consistent experiences for the public and prevents each agency from reinventing the wheel or paying extra for the same tooling over and over. In this case, I would only recommend procuring services that are constantly used by many different buyers, such as email. And third, over time, these teams should use what they've learned to reorient agencies around service delivery and the public's needs. You should measure success by asking them to report on the public's top pain points and if they resolve them. The public shouldn't need to understand how the government is structured in order to get a benefit or service. Finally, I can also speak to hiring programs the U.S. Digital Service piloted and refined in order to quickly hire large groups of highly qualified candidates and agencies in accordance with HR and legal requirements if it's helpful.
Thank you so very much, Leah. Jesse?
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Dr. Jesse Fields. I'm a Harlem community doctor. I'm affiliated with Mount Sinai Hospital, and I'm a member of the New York City Maternal Mortality Review Committee, and I'm on the board of a national youth development program, the All Stars Project, which was founded here in New York City. I'm a leader in the citywide effort to protect public housing in New York City, and I am an independent because I believe that independence is fundamental to prioritize the important matters of health, housing, human rights, community empowerment, those people issues, important issues in all of our lives above partisan interests. But because I choose to be politically independent, my right to vote as an American citizen in New York City is taken away. I cannot vote in primary elections, the major determining elections in our city. And I cannot vote because I choose to be independent of political parties. This issue of the disenfranchisement of independent voters is a civil rights issue. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers, Fannie Lou Hamer, and so many others fought for equal voting rights. The Black community has led the fight for equal voting rights for all. The disenfranchisement of 1.2 million New Yorkers, a majority of whom are Black, Hispanic, and Asian, must end. And many independents are young people under the age of 40. The barriers to voting for all New Yorkers must be lifted, and you commissioners, you have the opportunity to put such an initiative on the ballot to open the primaries, and I urge you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. Commissioners? Please.
I'd like to hear more about the streamlined hiring processes you mentioned towards the end of your testimony.
Sure. We collaborated with HR programs and pooled agency resources to launch large applications for single subject matter expertise. So if we wanted to hire an engineer, we had people apply to be an engineer, and then multiple agencies would send subject matter expert engineers to review the resumes in a large pool. They would then share those resumes with HR for HR to do its vetting and priority assessments. And then from there, the HR would send along that list. So by the time HR had culled the list, there was a long list of skilled candidates who made it. Traditionally, in a lot of hiring practices, HR does that first culling, and then by the time the expertise gets to review the list of resumes, there are no qualified candidates. And so this is a way to like quickly, rapidly hire large pools of candidates.
Thank you. Please, Dawn.
Are you comfortable disclosing the agency that followed along this hiring process?
Well, it was run by the U.S. Digital Service, which was out of the Office of Management and Budget, but there were multiple agencies that participated, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Office of Personal Management coordinated it. I can send more resources about it.
Any additional questions? Doctor, I have a question for you. I was really struck by a point that you made when you were unpacking the data on unaffiliated voters in New York and your definition of disenfranchisement amongst those voters. You noted the disproportionate percentage that are young. I know that to be absolutely true, but I was struck when you described the unaffiliated voters as overwhelmingly Black and Latino. That surprised me. I have a sense of the geographic distribution of independent voters in New York, and I wonder if you can provide any more detail on your sense that the majority who are being, as you say, disenfranchised are Black and Latino.
Yes, that question actually was studied. Common Cause did a study, and it has been documented, and I would be very happy to provide the studies. I didn't bring them this evening, but I will provide them to the committee. It is a fact that the majority of independents in our city are people of color, Black, Hispanic, and Asian, and also younger, as you mentioned. So that has been very well documented. It's a national phenomenon, actually, that more and more younger voters and more people of color are becoming independent. It's the independents are the
The
largest.
fastest growing part of the electorate, certainly,
Yes,
certainly,
nationally
certainly
and-
amongst
and in
younger
New York
voters.
City.
In New York, I know that the greatest concentration of unaffiliated voters are in Staten Island, in southern Brooklyn, and then there's kind of uneven distribution in Manhattan and in the Bronx. So would love when you submit testimony to
Yeah.
have a little bit more detail.
Yes.
Because it would just be useful.
Right, I actually work with open primaries and they have done
Yeah.
many studies. The other issue which sort of complicates it is a bit, is that I have spoken to people on election day, just encouraging people to support the right of independence. I can't vote today, ask me why, and informing people. And many people come up to me and say, you know, I'm an independent, but I'm registered in a party because I want to vote. So that there are many more independents and they would like to stay independent,
Yep.
but the fact that they can't vote in the
They're forced to
primary,
make
some
a
people
choice.
are forced to, yes, to register
Thank you,
into a
Doctor.
party. Thank you.
Very, very, very helpful.
Thank you.
We appreciate both
Thank
of
you.
you. Our next witnesses are Brian Chen and Robert Gordon. Brian Chen and Robert Gordon. Brian.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Gaspard and members of the commission. My name is Brian Chen. I'm the Policy Director of Data and Society, an independent research institute that studies the real-world impacts of AI and technology. This administration is right to pursue efficient government services, but with that, there is going to be a lot of pressure being brought to bear by tech vendors to sell the city a vision of AI-enabled efficiency. And if the city wants to modernize government and streamline technology, it should move very cautiously before any adoption of AI. The promised benefits are unproven, the costs are real, and getting it wrong will be very expensive. So I'm going to make 3 points. First, AI is not the productivity miracle that it's marketed as. Despite what vendors say, there's little hard evidence that plugging AI into government workflows actually makes them more efficient. Although the technical capacities are very impressive, when it's integrated into real workflows, these tools remain error-prone and unreliable. And the costs of commercial AI systems are enormous and growing. Even corporate America is starting to balk and get sticker shock when they look at how much this AI token usage is really costing them. Given the city's budget constraints, we cannot afford to buy expensive technology that doesn't work. I'll point to smaller, more sustainable open source models that use less data, less energy, and they actually perform better as alternatives to the kinds of models that are coming out of big tech. Second, efficiency requires engaging the public and workers. Residents should have a say in whether and how AI is used in the services that affect them. And democratic decision-making is critical for ensuring that new technologies are more than just speedy or powerful, but that they actually align with public expectations. Further, city workers need to be involved in helping to set the goals and set the procedures for that technology adoption. They're the ones who are actually going to use that tool. They're the ones who can tell you how that might actually interrupt or get in the way of them doing their job. And importantly, all these steps should be done before procurement. That is the most impactful time to draw in key stakeholders in problem formulation and goal setting. And finally, efficiency requires seeing clearly through technology hype. When tech is rushed in without proper vetting, the city ends up locked into expensive systems that don't work, or they may violate people's rights. The city should formalize updates to its procurement procedures that center independent testing, impact assessments, transparency, data minimization, and clear accountability mechanisms for new technology systems. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Brian.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here. My name is Robert Gordon. I'm a vice president at the Recoding America Fund, a national nonprofit founded by Jennifer Polka to help governments transform for a fast-changing world. I've been a White House deputy and a New York City DOE employee. My dad worked at HRA for 30 years. Excellent public services demand an excellent civil service system for recruiting and retaining great staff, but New York's system is broken. There are about twice as many vacancies as before the pandemic in jobs the city desperately needs to issue permits for housing, to award contracts for roads, to collect taxes and deliver benefits. Much of the challenge is at the state level, but much is in the city's hands. 2,600 job titles, many with obscure names like administrative staff analyst, an obstacle course for applicants, starting with exams that take months to grade and may not be given for years, 14 to 15 months for exams, from exam to hire. On the manager's side, a forced choice among just 3 top exam scorers if they say no, rigid requirements to go down a list that may be years old. The objectives here are good. Nobody wants a return to Tammany Hall. But, and I say this coming from an organization that works on these issues nationally, other states and cities determine merit, prevent corruption, and respect organized labor without such labyrinths. Boston, Denver, and Seattle, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Colorado limit exams to a few departments like police and fire. A rule of 3 operates in 4 states. Most states have half or a third as many job classifications as New York. There is no reason to believe these places are more corrupt or their public employees less committed or qualified. Complexity favors the powerful and the popular. Those who know their way around get access, hiring exceptions, special authorities. Those with less influence lose out. And when the city can't hire the people it needs, as others have spoken to, it hires contractors who it pays much more for. A better way is possible: create broader job titles that match the labor market and create career pathways. Let managers hire based on skills and experience, not just test scores. Fight corruption and prevent corruption with targeted oversight, not straitjackets. Here are 2 ideas that specifically fit your charge. First, even in a world where the state has a great deal of power, consider changing the charter to take advantage of state-offered flexibilities. The New York Helps program at the state level temporarily suspended exams for many hard-to-fill titles, resulted in more than 40,000 hires. New York City opted out while 45 counties opted in. Program was just extended. New mayor, new charter commission could make a new decision. Second, for the longer term, borrowing from a plan of a different candidate for mayor, consider establishing a diverse commission to overhaul the city's civil service system, similar to the Speed Commission on Housing. Not to nibble around the edges, not to create more authorities or better websites, but to create soup to nuts change. Millions of New Yorkers are all in on this administration's ambitious vision, and I urge you to fix hiring so the city can deliver. Thank you, and I'm sorry to have gone a little over.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm going to make you go even a little further over time. If you don't mind repeating the 2 sentences where you cited examples from other cities.
Sure. So
I think this was an important passage.
yeah, so many cities and states with strong civil service systems and with strong unions do not have civil service exams. Some don't have them at all, and many have them just in police and fire. And so examples of those include Boston, Denver, Seattle at the state level, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Colorado. Likewise, this rule of 3 concept, which says you only get to choose the 3 highest scorers, that was once very widespread. It is much less so today at the state level. I haven't looked across cities, but at the state level, there's 4 states that still have a rule of 3. The federal government also just, and pre-Trump, under President Obama, President Biden, the federal government long has not used civil service exams, long has not had a rule of 3. It was President Obama who got rid of the rule of 3 at the federal level.
Thank you. Thank you both. Commissioners, Henry.
Thank you for your testimony. The cities that use as examples that have done away with civil service system, unfortunately, don't have the best example of the demographics of employees taking those exams that reflect the population. For instance, if you consider the city of Boston and Denver as an example of those, proportional to the amount of minorities that they have in the population, and those who work for city governments that bypass the civil service system do not reflect by twice as many the number of employees that are employed. So for us that work in this system, the civil service system has been a path of upward mobility and an opportunity for minorities especially to have an even playing field to apply for city jobs. So Can you explain to me why in New York that would be different, since we have already have had experiences, you mentioned Tammany Hall, where nepotism could also run rampant in appointing civil servants?
First, I appreciate the question. I want to agree with the premise that a diverse civil service is important as a statement of New York's values, and it's important to have a civil service that effectively serves such a diverse population as New York. I think there is good history of both federal and state use of approaches other than exams to get at broader populations. As I'm sure you know, like for a long time, these exams were a barrier to diversity. The federal government dropped civil service exams because they were a barrier, in fact, and adopted other approaches. The federal workforce in a very diverse metro area has historically been extremely diverse, and it has been a pathway of upward mobility for people of all races from all over.
Robert, can I ask you to just draw the microphone closer to you? I want to make sure that everyone here can.
So
can
I
hear.
think
This
my
is a really important.
yeah, my
discussion.
broad answer is I think that with the goal of having the kind of workforce that can effectively serve this kind of city, there are different pathways that are possible. And if you look at the federal government pre-Trump, you have very diverse civil service. You do have very meaningful and important pathways to the middle class. It's built the middle class and the DMV. And I think it can be done without rigid exams.
Commissioners, any other questions for?
I think
Please, Dawn.
I think it just adds to what my fellow commissioner was asking. So, because I'm looking for guidance, right? I used to run the agency that delivered those exams. So I could tell you, you never had enough staff, and even with the efficiencies that we had, and we had some really great wins at the state level, but it does take a long time because you are testing thousands of people in some cases for very few jobs, right? And so that has been the historical system. So, but there is bias in interviewing, right? So when we're talking about, folks making a selection for whomever is the best fit, in many cases, a woman, a person of color is not deemed the best fit when we're looking across, our different career paths. So are you suggesting, as opposed to a rigid exam that takes a long time to grade, are you recommending some other kind of blind recruitment, blind interview? I mean, because that's really part of the merit and fitness of, or the fairness that's inherent within civil service, is that your qualifications or your ability to do the job is determined by the score. And really the only time when you see someone who's selecting you is at the time of interview, but they already know that you're that one of three. So what other mechanisms accompany their review processes in these other states?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And again, I want to honor the point that both you and Mr. Garrido made about the role that exams play and values that they advance. I think there are other ways of getting at those values. Like you can review skills and experience. You can have objective rubrics for reviewing skills and experience. You can have multiple people involved in the process. So Maryland right now is using a process they're piloting, but they're using a process where there is someone from HR and there's the hiring manager, and they are both involved and they're both looking at individuals from those different perspectives. So it's not an anything goes. The manager picks whoever they want. There's a built-in check, but it's also not just turning on the exam. And then I do think it's really important to use, others have talked about data, and to have robust data so you are tracking what happens. It doesn't have to be a mystery as you evolve and as you change what the demographics of hires look like. Last thing is one of the prior witnesses talked about USDS and federal system, and I do think there are models. Again, that was a model that got to much faster, more effective tech hiring and jobs. And that's a model, the city should look to adopt at scale. The key thing is, and then I will shut up, the key thing is not just to have it be a pilot or an exception or someone gets to someone's boss and says, I desperately need these 15 people. That's how we usually do it. And you can't do that for structural change.
Brian and Robert, I'm grateful for your testimony. We're going to move on to the next panel now. Thank you both.
Thank you.
That was outstanding. So I'm calling now on Louisa Chaffee and Julie Swoop. But as I do that, I'm going to take advantage of the privilege of the chair just to say, Louisa, I see that as you're coming up, that seated right beside you is one of my absolute favorite public servants in Marla Simpson, who I think is just one of the most committed and passionate New Yorkers. And so excited just to see her here with you.
Well, thank you. I agree. Okay, is it on?
Yes.
All right, here we go. I'm going to read really fast. Good evening, Chair Gaspard. I'm Louisa Chafee. I'm the director of the New York City Independent Budget Office. IBO is a nonpartisan, independent government agency that owes its existence to the decision by New York City voters to adopt the proposals of the 1989 Charter Revision Commission. And in the case of IBO, that decision was due in no small measure to the vision and tenacity of Commissioner Messenger. So I do need to thank you, Ruth. My testimony today will cover 3 areas: modernizing procurement, budget transparency, and preservation of adequate reserves. 3 super exciting topics. Modernizing procurement. Based on the data today from the top 5 human service agencies, there are 768 human service contracts totaling $12.7 billion that expire at the end of this month, and only 199 of them have been registered. That's 26%, which means the rest of those vendors are going to continue to provide services and there will be no contract in place. By not registering contracts or contract extensions on time, the city forces such human service vendors to work for weeks or even months without a contract, a time during which the city is legally barred from paying or making advances. This situation causes enormous financial risk to the city, stresses critical service sector provision, and risks delivery of services, including services that the city is legally required to provide. The data is irrefutable that the city agencies get contract extensions, that's a different kind of procurement tool, registered on time far faster than new contracts, such as those that come from the RFP. So the IBO argues that agencies should be mandated in the charter to register extensions for contracts that would otherwise expire, and in any case where continued payment is otherwise at risk. These extensions could then easily be canceled once the new award is actually made and registered. The second issue I want to bring up is late payment on invoices. Again, back to those 768 contracts, 768 contracts with a total value of $12.7 billion. Those are mostly 3-year contracts. As of today, only 69% of the value has been spent, which means that an enormous amount of money is owed to those vendors, 31% owed to the vendors and not yet paid. This is like a real life example of how New York City makes its human service community provide services for free. So what could be done to address this? IBO would suggest or would support a charter mandate to require agencies to pay 80% of each invoice submitted by a human service vendor or a human service contractor in good standing within a reasonable period of time from receipt. A partial payment process could easily use modern technology to ensure that funds are paid initially and allow the city to continue its vetting process before releasing the remainder of the funds. Risks of overpayment are minimal, and there are ample tools to check after the fact that the system was working correctly. I'd also, or the IBO would also like.
You're at time, Lisa, so I
Okay.
hope you can.
We'd like to recommend changes to the Procurement Policy Board, an extremely exciting entity, and we'd like to suggest it go to 10 members. And we suggest you look at how the IBO is set up. It's in the charter and it establishes a process. I desperately need to talk to you about units of appropriation, a topic that Mark Shaw thinks is funny. They could be adjusted.
I'm sure that we will have an opportunity during the Q&A for you to use your considerable skills.
I'm
to-
sorry for speaking too
to-
long.
yeah. No worries. Julie?
Hi. Thank you to the commission for this hearing. My name is Julie Swoop, and I was on the Technology Transition Committee for the Mamdani administration. I'm a member of New York City DSA, and I currently lead a technology team in the public sector for my work. The main thing I want to talk about today is contracting in the public sector for private technology services. There are past leaders of the city that will say that contracting from the private sector is more efficient. I can tell you that this is false. I worked in the private tech sector for over 10 years at several successful New York City companies before working in the public sector. And while the practice of contracting does occasionally exist in the private sector, it is on a much, much smaller scale. There's a reason that contracting is much less common in the private sector because it is not viewed as an efficient long-term investment. Contracts have a defined endpoint after which they either must be renewed with the same vendor or all institutional knowledge of the work is lost. Hiring a new vendor to work on a technology project has significant onboarding costs as new workers are onboarded onto a project. The incentives of private contractors are to make money, which involves selling more services to the city. There is an incentive to upsell that is imperative in the private sector. The solution to this issue is hiring full-time employees to do technology work who maintain institutional knowledge, are treated well as public sector employees, and who can train their eventual replacements as they get promoted, retire, or move on to other work. This is how the private sector operates. Even leaving aside the question of whether private contracting is actually more efficient after private contractors take public tax dollars as profits, if the contracting model were more efficient, the private sector would adopt it. They have not. There are laws on the books, including Local Law 63, that require agencies to justify hiring private contractors instead of hiring full-time city workers. I'm not a lawyer, but it's difficult for me to see how these laws have been enforced over the past several years when contractors are routinely hired to do technology work that could be done by full-time city employees. I understand that for some in leadership, some well-intentioned people in leadership at all levels of government, that it is much easier to get one-time costs approved for private contracting rather than a full-time hire for both budgetary and bureaucratic reasons. I work in the public sector. I know this problem myself. But to not confront this question is doing a disservice to our city workers and doing a disservice to the working class of New York City. We need to break our dependence on private technology contracting while maintaining civil service protections for the workers of New York City because the status quo is broken. Thank you.
Thank you both for your muscular testimony. Henry first. I really appreciated these two interventions. Henry?
Thank you, Luisa. The discussion we had about vendors not getting paid, nonprofits specifically, has been something that continues to bother me. You said in your testimony, 31% of those in the human service haven't been paid by the city of New York, but are still required to continue to do the work. You propose an idea that's intriguing about the 80% advancement and then, whatever recruitment mechanism is done. Have you proposed what specifically would you propose in the charter be changed to allow for such advancement of payment? And as such, is this something that would be administratively implemented, or is it something that would change some of the recommendations you made on your PPB amendments?
I would recommend that the charter instruct the PPB to uphold certain standards and that the PPB be held to implement certain rules. I have, believe it or not, like 5 more memos on this, and I'd be happy to share them with you.
I appreciate the testimony and maybe a question around the targeting. Is the proposal specifically for human services, or is the proposal for contract services writ large?
It should be for all. I would recommend that it be for, or the IBO would recommend that it be for all procured services. I just focused on the human services because it's easy to pull those out and the scale is shocking.
Okay. And then my other question is around your recommendation of contract extensions, registering the extensions before the new contract is registered for the next 3-year tranche, or for some people it's a 1-year tranche. How would you have you thought about whether or not that potentially biases towards keeping the same entities in a recurring contract?
The extension would be for entities. It wouldn't stop the competition from happening. But what's happening now is that an RFP, a competition goes out, and it takes so long that there's a gap. So the extension would just be to fill that gap until whoever the new winner is. but it wouldn't impact who's competing or who's awarded.
No, yes, but I guess I'm just wondering whether or not there would be any concern about, from an agency perspective, it feeling easier to just do the extension and re-register them with a new contract, and therefore you keep the same basic set of actors sort of in a revolving role, which, thinking about some of the issues around equity and access that have come up, making sure that there are new nonprofits, providers, companies that get to have access to many of these RFPs.
So thank you for the question. One of my memos has to do with the PPB board composition and that they should be required to meet 4 times a year and produce an annual report. And part of the report would be to report on issues like this, so as to make sure there's transparency.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, I'm going to
absolutely.
withhold
So-
information.
So for Julie, as my fellow commissioners gather their questions, I just have one for you. I'm always excited by provocation, and certainly your testimony about the popular political narrative around the tension between private sector efficiencies and costs to the public certainly is thought-provoking. I wonder if you have any additional and specific data to share that will give us a sense of what the cost benefit is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of examples in city contracting that can serve as data in themselves. Like, the horror stories that come to mind are like a CUNY contract with Oracle for like a course management system. Susan, I forgot you're a CUNY person, but Susan can probably tell you all about this. But this is something where tens of millions or possibly even hundreds of millions were invested in Oracle that could be funding, a lot of middle-class jobs for tech workers in New York City, but were instead shipped off to, Larry Ellison and oligarchs. And the system sucks. Susan can testify
Is that a technical term?
Yes, yeah, it's a term that we use.
They're ending it too, so we now have to be trained on a new system.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was during, I believe, the de Blasio administration. But I would just emphasize, like, contracting is the status quo for technology, and I think maybe that's because it seems like somewhat of a mysterious thing to a lot of people that are not familiar with it themselves. And also, it sort of has grown a lot as part of city expenses, where, maybe 20 years ago, contracting out for some of these technology services was more understandable, but now technology is impacting basically every worker at the city. And we are spending billions and billions of dollars on it. And I don't think we are spending it in a way that benefits the city, benefits the workers, or the working people of New York City.
Thank you. Kathy?
I hear you. We had testimony on Monday night that suggested that that part of the problem was that we've got every agency has its own procurement system for contracting technology contracts, and suggested, particularly now that that we have we have very strong leadership in technology in this administration, they suggested centralization of that process, which I think reinforces your point in a sense, because sometimes stuff may have to be contracted out, but to the extent that you had the expertise and it wasn't kind of agency by agency. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think with the description of the problem, I do agree. But I actually think Leah, a previous person that gave testimony here, described the solution pretty well, which was internal digital service organizations. There was an organization called 18F at the federal level that was essentially a public sector contractor within the federal government. They were public sector employees that were actually, like, agencies would pay 18F to use their services. And of course, it was destroyed by our counterparts in DOGE immediately after Trump took office. But I agree with the premise of centralization, but it can also be that we're contracting with public sector workers and have a digital services agency within city government.
Thank you. Please.
Couple quick questions. You talked about, or you proposed paying 80% of these invoices within a reasonable amount of time. I assume that's for undisputed invoices. Do you have a separate process or timeline for how you would deal with disputed invoices, which make up a significant portion of the invoices that the city gets?
So many of the disputes, contracts are set, the budgets of a contract is set at the beginning of the term, and the bulk of the invoice has to do with personnel services and rent and other fixed costs. Often the dispute has to do with a minute amount of the overall invoice. It might be a legitimate dispute, but it holds up the entire invoice. And remember, every city contract is audited at least at the end of the 3-year cycle, if not every year. So that's why we're proposing to stop the financial risk both to the city that they owe these monies because of the contract and to the providers because they're owed the money, but rather pay the invoices and then pay 80%. And with the 20%, go back and hold that money and figure out whether or not if there are areas of dispute, how to resolve those.
And how would you propose changing how the PPP is set up? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, I'd love to. There are 5 members of the PPB right now, 3 from the controller and 2 from the, 3 from the mayoralty and 2 from the controller. The IBO has 10 members on the advisory committee, and you can read the chapter in the charter. It's very exciting, very specific as to who. A leader of government, a leader from a union, Henry Garrido, a former leader. No, for union is Henry Garrido right now. But anyway, it's very specific in the charter, like exactly the functions. So both Henry and Kathy are currently on my board. That's what I'm stumbling through. I would recommend that the PPB reflect the diversity of what New York City is trying to procure. Experts like my colleague here, Julie, who has insight, could serve on the PPB and assist by making them meet 4 times a year, by reviewing procurements, by requiring public reporting, both how is procurement standardly working, how are innovative procurements working, how is the system shifting? Because the entire system right now is really opaque.
Thank you both. Louisa, I have to say that I'm inspired that you are as excited about the chapter of the PBB and the charter as some of us are about the Knicks. And it's a really cool thing. And apparently Mark has announced his candidacy against Henry.
But I just want to, 2 things now, correct the record, right?
The microphone, Mark.
It's on.
It's on the record.
One is.
He's going to say, if elected, I will not serve.
I was not laughing at the U of A issue. I was smiling at it, having been on both sides of the issue over the years. And with regard to Henry, part of the IBO process of the advisory board includes having former members of government be on it. Having been a former OMB director who is formerly on the IBO.
Yes, yes.
Fantastic.
Exactly. So, but not current members of government. Thank you.
Thank you. So I made a commitment at the very top of this session that we would take 5 panels from those of you who are gathered in the room. And then after every 5 panels, I would then turn to 2 of our friends in our online community. And I will do that now by calling on Julie Samuels and John Furby Manning.
Hello.
Screen.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Julie Samuels. I am really sorry I can't be there in person. I am moving tomorrow morning, so I'm surrounded by moving boxes. I appreciate your patience. I'm the president and CEO of Tech NYC. I have written testimony that has been submitted, but I'm going to say a few things in response to some of what we've been hearing so far tonight. I also should mention I was a commissioner on the, I guess, technically second most previous Charter Revision Commission, the one with the ballots, the one with the one, not, one before with Kathy. I think we're the only two that are here today. And I also have served on the prior two administration's tech transition committees. I feel very passionately about this issue. I want to thank Mayor Mamdani, Chair Gaspard for convening this commission. I think the fact that you're focusing on tech tonight is incredibly important and meaningful and shows that you all really care. If you haven't read it, I would recommend everyone goes back and reads an article in The Atlantic that I'll share from a few years ago by Anne Lowry called The Time Tax. It really, I think, gets to the heart, and we've heard this tonight from other people who've testified as to why this issue matters, as to how technology can be a very important tool to make government more fair and work for more New Yorkers. I'm going to talk about a few things that we've already heard about tonight in a little bit more depth, and I'm going to focus on things that I think are ripe for the charter in particular. At the highest level, like many people have said, the fact that government is siloed and that technology sits in silos is a huge problem. And I think ways to address that include, of course, procurement reform. I pretty much agree with everything Louise said, particularly ensuring that entities that contract with the city get paid. Civil service reform is crucial. That is obviously something that we would need to look to the charter to do well. But I think that, the other thing I care so much about is to look to the MMR. I think it was Andrew who talked about using more of a dashboard approach, more frequent updating. That's something that the charter addresses directly. I think we might want to consider moving it out of the mayor's office of operations and having it be fed by real-time data and available to more people in a more digestible format. I think more than anything, what will drive real change in city government to ensure that technology is used more appropriately, but also to ensure that it is fair and equitable, is to fundamentally accept that we need a unified technology leadership in the city. I would like to see some kind of deputy mayor for transformation and innovation, real budget line, real agencies reporting up. I think only when we have that kind of political commitment to working across government, across agencies, and across silos will we be able to make the kind of changes that New Yorkers deserve. And I want to just respond to a couple other things I've heard tonight, and then I'll stop. Job displacement came up in the civil service. At Tech NYC, we run a great program called Decoded Futures, where we train New York City nonprofits on how to build internal AI capacity. We have seen zero job displacement. We have seen, as the previous speaker said, much happier employees who get to do
overtime, Julie.
I'm
so I
over
don't
time.
wanna-
Okay, who get to do the work they want to do. And then the last quick thing I'll say is internet access is key to equity, and we can do a lot more in the city to make sure all New Yorkers have access to broadband. And the
Thank
very
you.
last thing, okay,
Thank you.
I'm done. Thank you.
Julie, you're getting 5 for the price of one. So we're gonna, I'm sure you'll get it. I'm sure you'll get a question or two. John? Is John Furby man?
Hi.
Hello, John.
Hello there. Thank you. My name is John Manning. I am a retired city analyst and a resident of Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. I am testifying this evening in support of placing a referendum on the ballot this November for having open political primaries for local New York City offices. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Open primaries are not a radical or controversial idea. Open and nonpartisan primaries occur in cities and states across the nation. I believe they would be an excellent fit for our local situation here in New York City. The situation that exists today in New York City is that the Democratic Party primary is the final event for all 3 citywide offices and for many council seats as well. The other parties simply can't compete. Moreover, there are well over 1 million independent or unaffiliated registered voters in New York who find themselves ignored by the process. The current system of primaries for individual parties, in which one must be a registered party member to vote, and then the general election between the primary winners, has created an illusion of a fair game here in the city. The reality is that the party machine and its insiders have a closed game where being nominated for controller or public advocate is a consolation prize for those who didn't have the juice or pull to be nominated mayor. This phenomenon has compounded on itself with the creation of gerrymandered council and state legislative districts that once had vibrant elections where the residents had real alternatives. I'm old enough to remember liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats, as well as many other choices as well. There used to be bipartisan cooperation on such matters as the city's quality of life and economic health. There used to be 60% plus voter turnout. Public cynicism about the political process is responsible for today's miserably low voter turnout rates. Every election cycle, there are numerous well-intentioned and talented ordinary citizens, retired cops, retired school principals, small business owners, community block association presidents who sincerely care about improving the city, and they try running for office, but they simply haven't got a chance to compete against the machine. We must give them a chance. The political parties will still promote their candidates and will not be made irrelevant. A long time ago, the young Fiorello LaGuardia was a left-wing blowhard who had been written off. The Brooklyn Republican Party gave him a chance, and we got the best mayor in city history. When we open up this process and we think outside the box and put our ideological baggage aside, we can get a city hall of people that really care. I asked the Charter Revision Commission to really make a difference with its work this year for improving the city by facilitating open primaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you. Commissioners, questions for these two online witnesses? Please, Dawn.
Hi, Julie. This question's for you. Since the city of New York fills over 80% of its positions through civil service, I know you mentioned civil service reform. Are there specific recommendations that you have?
Thanks. There are specific recommendations, and I can get you more details. I would say that there have been, in the last few years in particular, a couple of examples of things you can even do with a lighter touch that we might want to look at. Particularly in 2020 during COVID, when some emergency powers were used, the state did a great job of moving quickly there. In particular, we can get you all those details, both in hiring, but also in partnering with the private sector, which is something I didn't get to talk about. Private sector volunteerism is something that is also a really important element that I wanted to touch on, which isn't exactly your question. I apologize for that. But I have a lot of ideas too on how we can make that work well. There is so much energy in the tech sector right now. There are so many people who want to help, and there are ways. It's not quite civil service reform. It's a little bit closer to procurement reform where we can really unlock that.
Thank you.
Mark, please.
Yeah, Julie, you mentioned in your testimony the idea of wanting a deputy mayor for exact words you use, but technology, right?
Yep.
And I guess my concern is, I mean, we've been talking about trying to make sure that, I mean, we view the New York City Charter as, the government's constitution. And I mean, with regard to deputy mayor, the charter has a simple sentence that says the mayor shall appoint one or more deputy mayors.
Yeah.
At his choosing, right? And, given how issues like technology, especially changing pretty dramatically over time, were you recommending a charter change on that, or?
No, that's a great question. I don't think, I am well aware that we don't need to change a charter to appoint a deputy mayor. The point I was really trying to make is that we need senior unified leadership. I actually believe if we were starting from scratch, if we were writing an entire new charter and reorganizing the city from the barest bones, that a CTO, not unlike what we have now, makes the most sense, kind of like OMB that would sit across the agencies. But because there's so much history with how we've had a CTO, we've had a CDO, we've had all of these various tech offices in the past, 20 years. And what it's done is kind of created this Christmas tree effect of, I would say, I wouldn't say necessarily ineffective, but I would say underutilized and underpowered technology offices. And in order to effectuate the kind of change that I think you all want to do and should do as part of this charter commission, you need to really put the kind of political power behind it, because it's really, really hard.
Thank you. Please, Commissioner.
Julie, I just want to name that one of the things that you brought up, which to the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure we've heard in testimony so far, is around the digital divide, which, considering the conversation around technology, AI, data, feels like a critical piece. So curious if you have specific charter focused recommendations around bridging the digital divide and widespread broadband access for all New Yorkers.
Yeah, I think, well, of course, I think this is really important, and I'm glad you kind of went back to that. I think I would just say really quickly that there has been significant testimony, and you all will continue to get significant testimony about a lot of the risks of too much technology in government. But I think if we had more digital equity, we actually also lower some of those risks. As far as what we can put in the charter about equity, that's something, again, that I think, really empowering. This is true not just with technology, but it's true with technology, similar to how it is true with budget. It sits across so many agencies, and it is not a single agency problem to fix. And so it, again, requires, I think, through the charter, ways that you unify and ways that you fund the right offices to do the big, audacious work we need to do, whether it is implementing technology in government or ensuring that there's broadband access for every New Yorker. And that's something that I would love to follow up with the team on, specific ideas. I think that would be a great thing to put in your recommendations.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, any other questions for these panelists? Julie, I appreciate that you conjured up the old Anne Lowry seminal story from 2021. Really, really important story. That column opens with a number of anecdotes, and one of those anecdotes is about a New York City data analyst who had lost her job, and she then had to spend the next 6 months chasing down the bureaucracy for her unemployment insurance. And if anyone thinks that government is working well anywhere in America, all you need is one crisis that puts real downward pressure on that. And we saw a debacle of maladministration in red states, blue states, and purple states on unemployment insurance. It tells us that there's so much that we should and could be taking advantage of with the technology that's been available since the 20th century, let alone 21st century. So I'm really glad that that you reminded me of that story, and I appreciate testimony from both you and John. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service, all of you.
Thank you. Now we're going to return to the room. I'd like to invite Spencer Williams and Jordan Shapiro to testify.
Would you like to go first?
Thank
All right. Good evening, commissioners, and thank you for holding this hearing this evening in Brooklyn. My name is Spencer Williams. I am the Director of Land Use and Topography for Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso, and I'm here to share testimony on his behalf. Two of our office's main charter responsibilities involve land use and oversight of community boards. And I'm here to share some ideas about how both can be improved to strengthen equity, efficiency, and engagement with city government. As stated in the preamble to the city charter, BP Reynoso affirms that, quote, "We strive to be a city where the value, talents, and contributions of every New Yorker are recognized and embraced, and where equity and inclusiveness, community empowerment, accessibility, and opportunity for every New Yorker are the unwavering standards to which we are held accountable in all aspects of governance, business, and service delivery." Last year's commission made important changes to support affordable housing and fair housing. We are hopeful that this commission will further those goals by including a mandate for the city to create a comprehensive plan. New York City is one of the only major cities in the world that does not have such a plan to guide how land will be used, where investments will be made, and how communities will accommodate growth and change. This leaves too many decisions open to political whims, increasing rather than addressing disparities across neighborhoods. Shows up in health outcomes, shorter lives, hotter summer days, access to open space, lack thereof, and even the number of available school seats. What we need to do is deliver a whole of government approach that prioritizes working people with a just efficiency, a commitment to eliminating disparities and advancing equity with limited but targeted resources. As part of that, the comprehensive plan should include, at a minimum, just a simple statement that requires the city to do a comprehensive plan similar to the citywide waterfront plan. So that would be a citywide comprehensive needs assessment, a plan for growth and a future land use map, meaningful community engagement, and a 10-year capital plan that helps to implement the vision, focusing on historically underserved neighborhoods. In addition to that, our second recommendation to support effective service delivery is to increase support for community boards. The community boards across the city are underfunded and struggle to carry out core mandates. Members do not have professional expertise or assistance and are conflicted by being targeted to be supported by various overlapping agencies in the charter. And so we are calling to create a community board central office that would support and streamline the services that are in community boards, giving to them planning expertise, communications and technology, space needs, human resources, procurement, intergov support, legal support, and additional training. We have submitted detailed comments to the commission, and we are looking forward to answering any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jordan.
Hello, my name is Jordan Shapiro. I am the, sorry,
Thank you.
gender neutral names, you know.
Yes.
Associate Board Program Manager with Beta NYC. Thank you, Chair Gaspard and esteemed commissioners for the opportunity to testify. For nearly 17 years, Beta NYC has worked at the intersection of civic technology and democratic participation in New York City. We have digitalized the community board application process. We built the only map that lets New Yorkers identify their political and administrative districts, and we run a help desk to connect residents and government agencies with needed data analysis. This commission is focused on efficiency, and so are we. Here is the contradiction that we keep running into, and I'm going to echo some comments from previous folks. New York City has some of the most progressive open data and digital transparency standards in the country, written into our own charter. And yet the city pays a private company to host the website that serves its own laws. That contradiction is an efficiency problem, and the solution has a name. It's called digital sovereignty, or the city's ability to own and freely control its own digital infrastructure. As long as New York City is paying private vendors and consultants for the foundational infrastructure that enables the government to host its laws and services, we are leaving efficiency on the table. Every licensing fee paid to an external software is a dollar diverted from more critical services, and every vendor dependency is a potential point of failure in security and privacy for New Yorkers. We are here today to ask this commission to dedicate time and resources to digital sovereignty as a core component of this efficiency mandate. New York City is closer to this goal, perhaps, than we may realize. Charter sections 20F, 20U, and 1072, so that's the Office of Data Analytics, the DOITT, and the machine readable laws for public records requests already reflect this principle, but in fragments. And this commission should unify them to change how we run our digital services. This is not a new idea. In the 1840s, New York City built the Croton Aqueduct to create clean water as a civic right. And, you know, as a part of the administrative code, talking about that, it says, no patented hydrant, valve, or stopcock shall be used by the Department of Environmental Protection unless the patentee or owner of the patent shall allow its use without a royalty. Can you imagine a water system where every time a fire hydrant was opened, the city had to pay a licensing fee? That is the system that we are currently in with our digital infrastructure, our laws, our data, our services. So we have three opportunities here for charter updates in regards to digital sovereignty. One, establish digital sovereignty as a unified digital governing principle, freeing New York City from dependence on proprietary systems and giving them the freedom to provide digital services fully equitably to all New Yorkers, extend Charter 20U's existing machine-readable API requirement for public records requests to all laws, and to create a digital services team for all New York agencies. Thank you.
Thank you both for your testimony. Please forgive me for having mixed up your names. And Jordan, please know that I really appreciate your Gilded Age articulation when you ran through that old coding. Questions from commissioners? Kathy?
Mayor Bloomberg had toward the end of his tenure set up a nonprofit organization, and the idea was very much what you're talking about, to establish some kind of digital sovereignty. Are you familiar with that, and what happened to it, and why it apparently didn't work?
I am not.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's an important question. So it's going to be, I just turned to the staff of the commission to say, I think that this testimony was a really important intervention, and Kathy's question is critical. So I hope staff will help us to get an answer to that question, please.
Yeah. Jordan, really appreciate the testimony. And maybe a question that is not entirely fairly to you, but maybe you're raising as a part of this. So also speaks to somebody previously that was with Andrew, and I think his name is Carl. Is this question around, as a self-proclaimed data wonk and nerd and stats person for life, right? One of the things that I don't know that we're entirely contemplating is many of these data systems, public records, were not contemplated as being open in a digital format, and therefore importantly being combined, right? And so I understand somebody else who testified previously around health records, right? These health portals, but health records have a massive amount of protections and infrastructure around them. When we move outside of academia and IRBs, internal review boards, structures and systems that say this is how you're allowed to use the data, and we bring them into democratizing data, which I love, there is also this massive risk of now being able to combine data systems in ways that we can actually assess very confidential and very private levels of information about New Yorkers and communities that potentially can be very harmful and sometimes weaponized. And I say this being an ED of a nonprofit who has built one of these off of open data laws. So I think a question for you, but also others to contemplate, because I think this democratizing data and digital sovereignty is a critical piece. I love your fire hydrant example, is also a question of how are we not also building a data warehouse that then can be used against us. And I think particularly from my vantage point, oftentimes that ends up being weaponized against our most marginalized New Yorkers.
This is an essential question, and I would love to follow up with more information for y'all about this, because this is called a federated data system, whereby these systems do not become linked, and unless you have particular two-factor authentication. There are many countries, there are many governments who have put these things in place that have much greater data security protocols than we do, and I'd be happy to chat with anybody afterward in the future about it.
Thank you, Jordan, because that's a critical piece that nobody has said yet, and everybody's been talking about like everything can go in one big gumbo pot, and the answer is please don't put it all in one big gumbo pot. And Spencer, I don't know why that was what it was. And Spencer, I wanted to ask you around comprehensive planning. Oftentimes there's a strong pushback of like, will we end up in just inevitable like constant planning cycles, and what is actually the end goal of having a comprehensive plan as opposed to just planning inertia forever? So want to understand that.
Yeah, the goal of planning is action. It's to make decisions that are complex, that require difficult considerations. Comprehensive planning does not solve problems. It creates a framework to support decision makers to do so. And so a good example is like when we have a street that has multiple goals. We need to move freight, we need to move people, we need to move bikes. A line on a map doesn't necessarily solve that problem, but policy guidance, real budget investment, coordinated whole of government approach means that at the end of the day, everyone who's using that street has their needs met, is hopefully traveling safely, and that we have a budget that is responsive to that. And so currently we have things like a streets plan and a housing plan and block by block and environmental justice plans. And we're doing a lot of planning work. The challenge is that we're not talking to each other to make sure that we are making real strategic investments that eliminate disparities across communities. And so that is a real waste of both government time, but also government expertise. And so when we have a displacement risk index that we use in one part of government, but don't use it somewhere else, we've wasted a lot of that expertise, time, and resource. And comprehensive planning allows us to use that expertise across silos and across departments much more efficiently.
I know we have other questions on both sides. Kathy, no?
Sure. Go ahead. You go.
Just very quickly, Spencer. So the concept of having this central office for community boards.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out, so where would they sit? Because, you know, the current structure is that a CB reports to the borough president.
That's
If you're
correct.
talking about having a central office, what are they providing? Just guidance, technical assistance? Are they laying out policy?
Everything from HR. So the borough president's office is charged with supporting the community boards. And then so we provide digital support and services, HR, space acquisition. There's a whole range of things that each of the borough president's office are doing. In addition to that, the Community Engagement Commission is charged with providing some training and support, as well as the Department of City Planning, a whole host of
Oh,
other
no,
things.
I know, but I'm saying for this central office, and I'm sorry.
Yes, no, yes.
Like who would they report to, right? Because
We
you
are
still
proposing that
have
they would be an independent office, similar to the independent budget office. And so one of the ways that you can think about this, particularly from a land use perspective, is that we have a situation in which in the city council has a central office where they are supported with land use staff. The mayor has the Department of City Planning. The borough president has their land use office. Community boards are sort of left with the only people who don't have that sort of roster of professional support. And so when you think about the distribution of power in the charter, particularly when it comes to something like land use review, community boards are at a disadvantage. And that often shows up in a way that they say, we don't have the resources, we don't have the contracting, we don't have the support that we really need to be a meaningful participant in these processes that impact our communities. And so as the chair of the borough board in Brooklyn
But
here, I
the
hear
answer
that
is you're
all the time.
proposing an independent.
That is correct, Chair.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appeal, please.
Yeah, real quick. Thank you, Chair. Two questions. I find this idea of digital sovereignty, particularly with your example, to be quite interesting. And what major city in the country is closest to digital sovereignty right now, if you know? And I'd love to know like how that's working out for them. And secondly, if there was a way to do so within the charter, is New York City ready to be digitally sovereign right now, or is that something that's going to take period of time? Like, can you get rid of all these private vendors right now? I suspect the answer is no, and you'd have to build a lot of infrastructure internally to do so, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
So as far as I'm aware, most cities in the United States are still partnering with corporate entities, big tech, in order to procure their government services. However, there are many, many examples, mostly in Europe, whereby there are systems where everything's going open source. People are building things in-house. The X Road in Estonia is a federated, open source federated data system. Then to your second question about like, we're here, how do we get there kind of thing. Our recommendation is that this becomes a philosophy of how we then approach our broader digitalization program and system. So if our idea is that we want to be more digitally sovereign, we then put that into the charter. We say, this is what all agencies are, this is our operating principle for agencies, and each group, or however we want to structure it, right? This is totally up to the New York City government. You say, do we do an audit and look what can be trimmed? Where are the biggest contracts? Where are we being sold services that we don't need just because that was what the base package was? Who are the most unequitable companies that we're contracting with, how do we then overturn them so that we can put something in place that's more equitable, that we own, that we're in charge of, getting those digital services, design services teams in order to maintain them, create cycles of leadership across the tech ecosystem. We're many generations into the technological evolution. We have many people who could be supporting on this, and the question is, are we asking them?
So just on my experience, having partnered with Bloomberg Philanthropies on this issue in the past, I know that Barcelona, Amsterdam, and Geneva have made significant progress on digital sovereignty. There's no city anywhere in the world that has absolutely, achieved digital sovereignty. But I'd say that those three are leading lights. And if you look at cities that engaged in the Mayor's AI Forum, it gives you, they actually created metrics for this, and it gives you a sense of how far along those cities are. And US cities are in the dark ages on this. So thank you both. Appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony. Andrew Resej and Robert Joyce. And Andrew, please forgive me if I have mispronounced your last name. Richer. Thank you.
Chairman and members of the commission, thank you for your time and service. My name is Robert Joyce. I'm the Director of Policy at Abundance New York, an advocacy organization focused on making it easier, faster, cheaper, and fairer to build and deliver what New Yorkers need. I'm a renter, a native Brooklynite, and a career public servant. I too would like to bring up certain reforms to the civil service system in this city. I'll take the chair's direction and veer from my prepared testimony to instead associate myself with Mr. Gordon, my fellow witness, my fellow Roberts points that he made earlier, and regarding the number of positions that sit vacant, the percentage of positions that require an exam, the amount of exams, et cetera. So in proposing a potential solution here, I would propose that the commission recommend an amendment to require the mayor to submit a 5-year city government workforce plan modeled on the capital strategy to propose longer-term hiring targets, title combination and reforms, and hiring process and management reforms to achieve the administration's overall policy goals. The larger principle here, zooming out, is to make staffing decisions for the city as a whole downstream from our overall policy desired outcomes and staff from there. So the federal government's been doing this for years now in different ways. I worked for the Federal Emergency Management Agency at the start of my career in the federal government. FEMA is able to flexibly hire people on a 2 to 4 year termed civil service contract. They have the same, they are civil servants in that they are not political appointees, but they come in knowing that there's no guarantee of a job for them after that 2 years. They are regularly extended, but not always extended. And that is because there's not always a large amount of disasters, thankfully, to recover from, and there's not the same need for that same amount of staff, right? And Congress and the federal government, in recognizing that the needs here are serious, but they also ebb and flow, they've created this flexible structure. DARPA famously is another example of where the federal government does this, right? They set up specialized teams to meet unique needs based on national security outcomes that they want. So I'll leave with these examples and say that a charter amendment that creates this workforce plan would be a regular opportunity for the city to revisit the workforce needs of the city, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrew Richer, and I'm the founder of Civic Hall at Union Square, which is the city's and I think the country's largest center for people, a community of people working on solving problems, technology problems for the public good. During the transition, I handed a memo to the mayor warning him that he was about to set out on a long, arduous road trip, but that the car he's being handed is a 1998 Pontiac. Bald tires, a leaky gas tank, a steering wheel that comes off in your hand, and a speedometer stuck on 5. I suggested he could choose a different car, but it would take time because this isn't really about technology. It's about changing the city's culture of innovation. So I admit I giggled when I heard that COGE was going to work on government efficiency, because how efficient can you really make a 1998 Pontiac? I applaud the effort, but I just want to suggest that you might develop a strategy to upgrade the city to a 2015 Prius. So here's just one example. When a city buys software, it uses the same processes it uses to buy school buses and pencils. It procures, but software isn't a school bus. Software starts going out of date the day you install it. And the city's process is so slow, you've heard about it earlier today, RFP contracting approvals, that the technology is often obsolete by the time it's delivered. Software needs constant updates, security patches, and fixes. So just think about your iPhone. Apple doesn't tell you, doesn't sell you an iPhone, then charge you every time the operating system gets upgraded. It does this on its own because it knows that these security fixes are important to its relationship with you, and the city should have the same processes for the software it pays for. The shouldn't procure software; it should commission it with whoever builds it, and keeping them on the hook to keep it current to whatever's needed. So here's the vision I'd like to give you. Imagine a city where every agency has the capacity to use the most modern tools itself, because the real prize, especially with AI, isn't one more app. The tech issues you're hearing about today don't get fixed one at a time. They get solved through deep structural change in how the city approaches modernization. That's what lets the city's data finally talk to each other, and that's where the massive gains and efficiencies actually live. But that doesn't happen on its own through the Office of Technology that delivers systems down to everyone else. That's the old model, and it's the bottleneck. Staying current on a project, isn't the project you finish, it's the permanent condition of governing from now on. So let me leave you with 2 quick recommendations. First, the city should do what every serious private sector company already does, which is put someone in charge. Create the Office of Chief of Digital Transformation, led by a CDO, the Chief Digital Officer, reporting directly to the mayor, the first deputy mayor, and a director of OMB. And second, and this is the most important, is that you create a commission on digital transformation into the charter itself, a permanent body that keeps upgrading the city from the Pontiac to the Prius long after today's hearing is over. I made it.
That was so efficient. Thank you. Commissioners? Questions for these 2 witnesses? We have no questions. You were both precise and obviously really quite clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, members.
Thank you. Margaret Brown, Julia Stoyanovich. You're Julia? Is Margaret here? Margaret Brown? If Margaret is not here, then I'd like to invite Cherry Chung to come to the table. Thank you. Please.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Can you hear me?
We
Still
can.
good? Yeah, okay. My name is Julia Stoyanovich. I'm a professor of computer science and data science at New York University, where I also founded and direct the Center for Responsible AI. I've worked on AI governance in the city for nearly a decade, and I'm a proud New Yorker. I think I'm the first person with a foreign accent here, and we all know that the New York accent is a foreign accent, right? So my proposal is very simple. To streamline the government's use of AI, we must codify AI governance in the New York City Charter. The technology chapter, Chapter 48, is almost a punchline. It still governs cable television franchises, and its most modern obligation is publishing an online map of street closures. There is not one word anywhere in the charter about artificial intelligence or automated decision systems. And you can hold that up. The city's foundational document regulates cable TV and says nothing about the systems now deciding who gets benefits, housing, or a school seat. Codifying AI governance doesn't mean freezing technology into law. It means writing down 3 things the city already claims to believe, but has never recorded anywhere that lasts. First, disclose it. When the city uses an automated system to make decisions about you, you are told in plain language. Today, the Department of Education assigns every child a school lottery number and then hands it to parents as a string of unreadable code. This isn't transparency, it's transparency theater. Real disclosure means telling people in words they understand that the machine is deciding, what it is deciding, and how to question it. It is the cheapest accountability we have, and everything else depends on it. Second, prove it works. No agency deploys one of these systems where the stakes are high, like benefits, housing, hiring, or schools, without showing that it actually works. And the city does not buy what it cannot verify. This isn't red tape, it's the definition of efficiency. A tool that doesn't work is the most expensive thing that a government can buy. You don't have to look far. The city's own My City chatbot, costing over $500,000, told business owners that they could pocket their workers' tips, told landlords that they could turn away Section 8 tenants, and told stores that they could go cashless. All of these things are illegal. This administration shut it down to save money. That instinct was exactly right, and it's the standard I'm asking you to put before the voters this November. So the next $500,000 mistake is never deployed in the first place. Third, let people contest it. A decision you cannot question isn't a decision, it's a verdict. Anyone affected by one of these systems has the right to a real explanation, a right to appeal, and a right to reach a human being. Machines make mistakes, and they make them at scale. And the only protection against an error you can see is a person you can actually reach. That isn't a courtesy, it's the difference between a government that serves people and one that processes them. Disclose it, prove it works, let people contest it. 3 lines in the charter, 3 questions for the ballot. I'm out of time. I'm happy to tell you why we need to do this. It's because nothing else has worked, and I've been a witness to this since 2017 in the city. And also, I just want to tell you that you should give New Yorkers the right to make this choice. By withholding that choice from them, you are making a choice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Sherry Chung. I live in Park Slope. I run a company called Holly, which uses AI to help local governments modernize recruitment, job classifications, and compensation benchmarking. I would love to talk more about one core issue that has been raised by some others around how the city hires, pays, and manages its people. Some of the diagnosis has been shared around challenges that are faced in this system: 140-day wait just to learn an exam score, a system designed in 1883. I just want to add some things from my line of work as a potential root cause and what I've seen of that solution. Across 50 agencies that we work with across 8 states, behind a lot of those delays is an HR team that is buried in manual work, rewriting decades-old job specs by hand, building salary spreadsheets from scratch, pushing paperwork through processes that were designed a long time ago and haven't kept up with modern times. I believe that the system that we see in hiring is often slow, not because of public servants, but because they don't have modern tools to deal with the amount of work that they have for the challenges at hand. The problem is solvable. I do see this in all of the clients that we work with across 8 states, and I want to give you some examples of how they are using technology to make improvements. First, rewriting job descriptions. Many government specifications haven't been updated in decades. They carry barriers that staff can no longer see after years of familiarity. Something we work with is driver's license requirements, for example, on desk jobs that prevent qualified applicants from applying for those roles, gendered language that shapes who applies, degree requirements that screen out qualified candidates for no reason. The technology that we work with flags these in seconds at scale. For many of our clients, they're working through these requirements across thousands of classifications, a review that no staff member could do in a short amount of time manually. Second, salary surveys, research behind aligning pay with the market. Today, that means analysts hunting through agency websites one by one for salary schedules, labor contracts, job descriptions, rebuilding it all in a spreadsheet by hand. The data is usually stale before the spreadsheet is finished, which is why this work often gets contracted out in an expensive cycle. And this prevents the pay from actually tracking the market. And third, just the rote amount of paperwork. Many of our clients formerly did single reclassification analyses. For example, one would take 40 hours of staff time. These now take 30 minutes. Classification review worksheets going from 4 weeks to 1 or 2 days. So in many teams where they are chronically overworked and understaffed, AI is a tool that helps them when the mandates keep growing, but the headcount does not, and allows them to spend it on strategic work that actually gets people in the door faster. And I do want to say that humans still are making every single decision that matters, and the technology is simply there to assemble the evidence and allow the analysis to become more consistent. So I do believe that treating civil service modernization and hiring as the infrastructure project underneath every other promise this administration has made is important for speeding up the hiring cycle and modernizing how people come into the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Questions, commissioners? There are no questions for this panel, but I want to say, please do not take the lack of questions as a lack of interest. I saw lots of heads nodding. There were many notes that were being taken during your testimony and from the testimony of the previous panel as well. Just know that there's lots of engagement, but we're all determined to be as responsible as possible in getting as much testimony as we can before 8 p.m. tonight. But thank you both.
Thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you. You, Francis, and David Lee. Thank you. Please.
Okay, good evening, COGE and NYC. Thank you so much for holding these sessions and your service to New Yorkers. I'm beyond excited and, by the passion and expertise of everyone here, and particularly our sign language translators, so thank you. Let me start by testifying one thing that I have a strong belief in, Nixon 5. My name is Hugh Francis, and I'm here on behalf of HeyMomDani.nyc. This is a coalition of New Yorkers and leading civic tech organizations who want to help this city work better. So you might have seen our posters up around the city. We put them up on the weekend. This is what they look like. Our coalition includes the Mozilla Foundation, the global nonprofit behind a more open, people-centered internet, Radical Exchange and MetaGov, who design tools for participatory, self-governing democracy, Decentral Park, and Polis, an open source platform that's helped entire cities and countries find common ground on hard issues. At my group, Garden 3D, we're GSA certified at the federal level, we built technology for everyone from Google and Stripe to Pratt, ACLU, and Brooklyn Museum. We came together at an open assembly of 100 local technologists, and I'm here to speak to one idea, which is that New York City can become dramatically more efficient by making its technology open and participatory to the people who live here. So I handed you all a letter that we wrote to the mayor about open government and civic technology. So if you see him around City Hall, please give it to him. And let me tell you where these ideas have already worked. About a decade ago in Taiwan, a group of volunteers, engineers, designers, and everyday people got frustrated with the government websites that were confusing and hard to use. Instead of just complaining, they built better versions themselves and made them free for anyone to use. When an official site wasn't working, residents could go to a community-built version that actually did work, and the government would often fold these improvements back into the real thing. It cost the public almost nothing, and it turned ordinary residents into a volunteer workforce, quietly making public services better. Over time, officials saw how valuable this was and started inviting those volunteers to help directly. And one of them was Audrey Tang. She went on to be Taiwan's first digital minister, and she brought that same open, practical approach into government. Every week, she held open office hours, a full day where anyone could walk in and share an idea about how to make the government better. She kept her work transparent, publishing notes from her meetings so that the public could follow along. And she built simple online tools that let everyday residents weigh in on real decisions, from how to regulate rideshare apps to the pandemic response, where volunteers used open government data to build real-time maps showing which pharmacies had masks in stock, and in a matter of days instead of waiting for a long contract. Audrey is now a Mozilla Foundation Fellow, along with many other similar thinkers. And this isn't unique to Taiwan. The US web design system, built openly by the federal team at 18F, cut development time for agencies up to 30%.
You're at time.
Okay.
If you could just.
All I'm saying is we're here to help. This is not a rigid blueprint, but we do feel that we could work with the connections of key thinkers in this space to build.
You're at time.
Okay, thank you.
Hit the
Thanks for
crux of it. Thank you, please.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thanks so much for being here. It's an amazing day for New York City civics, as always. My name is David Lee. I am a fiscal policy analyst at the Center for New York City Affairs, and I also am an AI and climate physics researcher at Columbia University. However, I'm here specifically in my own capacity. So needless to say, I spent a lot of time playing around with data from New York City. Transparency and accessibility to public data are, of course, the paramount priorities of effective digital governance. And in the last decade and a half or so, the city has made really great strides towards the ideal of intuitive data infrastructure. One great example being Local Law 11, passed in 2012 under former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, colloquially known as the Open Data Law, as well as subsequent changes to it with Local Laws 37 and 38 in 2014 that mandated the publication of machine-readable laws. So the city sources of law, charter, administrative code, and the rules, as well as the city record. Now, I have just two bite-sized proposed amendments to the city charter to help make more of this data, specifically on the fiscal and budgetary side, more accessible. So the first requirement, or the first proposal I have, is to impose machine readability requirements for something I would call the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or the ACFR. As some of you know, this is required to be published by the city comptroller 4 months after the conclusion of a city's fiscal year. There is, to my knowledge, no charter requirement that actually mandates that the comptroller publish all of the many hundreds of pages of statistics in a machine readable format. In fact, this practice was only very recently started under former Comptroller Brad Lander, and hopefully will be continued by Comptroller Mark Levine. It would be nice to enshrine that within the charter as an explicit requirement. And then secondly, one of my favorite things to do is just going through the reams of New York City budget data at 3 a.m. on a Friday night, and it's just so much fun to do it. And I'm so glad to be in good company with others who hopefully feel the same way. But there's some problems with it, and one problem is on some documents you don't quite have that granular subdivision of expense budget data. So to give one example, if you go to the expense budget data that disaggregates based on funding source, federal, state, local, interagency lending, you actually don't go down below the unit of appropriation level. It only stops there. You don't go down to the smaller budget items, but budget code numbers and names. And then secondly, I'm calling for a consistent data ontology that is consistent across time, right? We want to do longitudinal studies to actually study how fiscal policy changes over time. Let's make labeling and semantics consistent. And I'm finished. Thanks so much for your service to the city.
Thank you. That was great. Questions from commissioners? Sure. All right. Thank you so very much.
Thanks so much.
A lot of enthusiasm on that panel. It was fantastic. Margaret Brown and Charlotte Munwood. Margaret and Charlotte. Margaret and Charlotte, paging. Are you Margaret or Charlotte?
Charlotte.
Thank you, Charlotte. I will assume Margaret is no longer here, and well, we'll move to online testimony next, please.
Thank you very much.
You're on your own.
I guess so. Good evening, everyone. To Chairperson Gaspard and members of the committee. My name is Charlotte, like the spider, and I'm a working musician and a New York constituent who lives in Upper Manhattan. Thank you for the opportunity for me to give testimony regarding changes to the city charter. I have never worked in government or politics, so I apologize in advance for my unpolished delivery and any shakiness of the voice that you may notice. My neighborhood is Washington Heights, and if you're familiar with the area around New York Presbyterian Hospital, you will know that there is an unusually high population of street drug use and chronic homelessness. Some of my homeless neighbors have been hanging out and breaking down in the 168th Street subway stop for as long as I've lived in the neighborhood, and that started in early 2021. As study after study finds, poverty and untreated mental illness are the primary underlying contributors to street drug use and homelessness. Despite this research, New York's first line of treatment for these issues is a police response. Despite the disastrous and sometimes deadly track record that the police have with regard to de-escalating situations involving mental health and addiction, officers are still dispatched to respond first and sometimes only to 911 calls involving mental health. Most recently, in the case of Jabez Chakraborty, police response to a 911 call requesting medical assistance led to Jabez being shot 4 times in the chest while he was experiencing a mental health crisis. The New York City of the 21st century has no place for police violence towards New Yorkers, especially those experiencing mental or physical distress. This is why I'm speaking in support of the creation of a Department of Community Safety through revisions to the city charter. My neighbors and I deserve to be able to call for medical help without fearing misunderstanding by the police or potentially deadly escalation of the situation by responding officers. With the creation of a Department of Community Safety, New York City has the opportunity to separate the threat of physical violence from its care response. We also have the opportunity to more effectively and efficiently allocate funding currently earmarked for the New York Police Department, whose overtime spending, for instance, is expected to reach $860 million in fiscal year 2026. To better serve New Yorkers and to keep the budget balanced, why not divert funding from policing and reinvest in programs of prevention and rehabilitation as housed in a Department of Community Safety? Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners? Thank you. There are no questions. Your testimony is well received. You know, of course, the mayor established the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, and many of these questions are being taken up in
Very
the
glad
first
to hear that.
instance there.
Yes.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
We will now receive testimony from 2 online participants, Stacy Bogue and Robin Graham.
Hi, could you hear me?
Yes, we can, and we can see.
Yeah, good evening. I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. So I'm a parent advocate for families with disabilities. My lane is autism. About a few years ago, Gail Brewer and
I'm sorry, are you Stacy or Robin?
Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah. Gail Brewer and I were working with trying to get a public school built. I had to do a report to present to David Banks and Brad Lander's office. And why this is really important is the DOE and the HR departments are not talking to each other. And there is a lot of confusion within the communities of disability. And it's very stressful. There's a tremendous amount of paperwork that gets lost. There's not one place that has all the information, as Ruth Messenger was saying, like our healthcare system in a hospital. You go to Northwell, they have everything. So I'm going to recommend a commission based on both parents who have children with disabilities, because I think it's really important. A lot of time the commission and people in politics have no idea what we're going through. and the DOE and the HR department are broken. And one of the interesting parts that came out of this for me is there was no data. There was no data to get. There was nothing, because nobody's been collecting data on this community. So whether it's AI, which sounds like it would help, but you do need people, but you need a commission or a committee to sit together and really write down how to make this run smoother. I also think you would save a lot of money, because I think there's a lot of people who are being hired who are not really doing enough for the child that needs help. And then what happens? The parent will pass away and this young adult is on their own. And they don't have, I have rooms and boxes of paperwork, because that's the only way that we could represent our child to get help within the system. New York State is one of the best states for disability, so I thank the state for that. But that's I can go on, but it's late, so I just want to say, I think it really needs to be addressed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Robin?
Good evening, commissioners, and thank you so much for this platform. My name is Robin Graham, and I'm representing the voiceless, the members of the incarcerated community and their family members. For 24 years, I have been mentoring incarcerated citizens and returning citizens through writing, sharing mental health issues, and responding to them on JPay and Securus Technologies. I have to say it's been a wonderful experience having them have access to tablets while in prison. It really cut down on stamps as such. However, Securus Technology has been gingerly becoming a monopoly. Securus Technology charges $6.50 for any transaction, monetary transaction that a family member sends. They recently taken over JPay, and JPay was free for families to contact their loved ones by messaging. Now you have to purchase stamps because Securus owns JPay. When you send money through JPay, it costs about $3. Now it costs $6.50. Now Securus is also going to take over GTL, which handles California prisons and prisons out west. So my question is, can we take the technology out of the hands of those vendors who are pilfering the pockets of the loved ones who are already struggling financially and then trying to send money to their loved ones? It costs $2.55 right now for a money order. So over the course of a year would be $61.20 if they were to send money orders. Some prisons don't accept money orders. They rather use Securus or another payment program. If the loved one was to send 2 payments per month for the year to a loved one in prison, it would cost them $156 as opposed to a money order for the year, 2 payments a month at $61.20. So there's a problem with this Securus Technology. They should not become a monopoly, because then they have control over the money that they could get for any transaction that a family member would have to pay to support their loved one while they're in prison. In addition, you should look into those other vendors who are selling overpriced items to the incarcerated citizens. Why should they have to pay more than we're paying for a sleeve of cookies, for ramen noodles, for toiletries, because nobody's looking and these companies can do that? They're the most vulnerable in our community, yet they are being asked to dig in the pockets of their loved ones just to have the bare necessities. So,
Robin, you're at time.
Thank you. Thank you for.
You can finish your sentence. You can finish the last sentence, Robin.
Well, so I just wanted to say, for those who don't have a voice, who could not attend, that please look into Securus Technologies and how they're trying to monopolize the monetary support of the families who are struggling. Thank you.
So much. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Mark?
Yeah, Robin, are you referring to the state jail systems or the city jails at Rikers Island?
I couldn't hear you. Could you say a little louder?
Are you referring to the state prison system or are you?
Yes.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
state prison systems are under secure technologies for the tablets. Federal prisons don't have, most of them don't have tablets. So they're still corresponding by mail with incarcerated citizens in federal prisons.
yeah. Okay, thank you. It's just, you know, our focus is on the New York City Charter, which controls New York City's government.
I understand that, yes.
Unfortunately, the state prison system is controlled by Albany. So we can pass that along, but it's not really subject to our issue.
But New York City is on JPay. As Securus is taking over JPay.
Right.
So
and
city,
you can talk to there's a new commissioner in New York City at Rikers that we could also.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Stacy, thank you for your personal and public advocacy, and sorry for the frustration of those experiences. And Robin, Mark is of course right that we will convey all of this, and thank you for being a voice for the voiceless. I spent the day a week and a half ago up at the Eastern Correctional Facility and understand all the deprivations that you described in terms of the costs, pressures for the families that are supporting inmates who are working towards their rehabilitation. So thank you so much. Rebecca Haywood and David Sheldon. Thank you both. Rebecca?
Good evening. Thank you for your patience. My name is Rebecca Haywood. I am a former city employee with experience at DOT, DCAS, and emergency management, and a technologist who has advised senior state and local government leaders on digital services, tech procurement, and workforce strategy across the country. I also run a job board and newsletter helping technologists move from the private sector into government that reaches thousands of people each week and hear regularly from the people that this city is trying to hire. Technology is vital to how the city runs and how New Yorkers receive services like much of the rest of our world today. Others have talked about the effectiveness of digital services and the need for civil service reform, but the city does not. We also need to talk about other aspects of the mechanism to hire these types of experts at scale. It has also been a struggle to hold vendors accountable for the technology products and outcomes they deliver. We rely on these vendors to build, maintain, and operate vital systems for delivering on our policy goals and make build versus buy decisions without sufficient internal capacity to be savvy customers. A recent analysis of city spending data found New York City spends at least $769 million last year on outside digital services. We need to make sure that we're set up to see the outcomes that we want to see. There are numerous examples from across the country that internal digital teams can build more quickly at a lower cost, ensuring that residents can access services more easily. A couple of the limitations on the hiring side. There's a lack of transparency for both candidates and agencies on things like understanding rules and procedures, on hiring timelines, and on numerous other issues. This has real impacts on the careers of city employees, the workload of waiting colleagues, on the lives of potential employees, and on residents receiving services. Folks don't know what exam to take. They don't know how to represent their experience in order to pass an education and experience exam, and they don't know how long they may need to wait to start a job after receiving an offer. A 6-month or more wait, which is very common between offer and start, is a financial filter to city employment. It selects for people in stable jobs with savings or family to fall back on. In addition, the standard in technology development has been a product-based model for decades in the private sector and has been changing in government for the last 10 years or so. New York City has a small number of teams and staff working in this way, but there is no civil service pathway to hire the type of staff needed to build in this modern model. We cannot hire staff at scale with skills like product managers, user researchers, data scientists, and more. The titles that exist in IT positions don't necessarily align with the backgrounds of people who would excel in these roles or who may have been trained in non-traditional ways. On the vendor side, our procurement model makes it challenging to keep vendors accountable and for the city to deliver on the outcomes we need to see. We often see that we don't have the skills internally and to hold vendors accountable to understand if what they say they can deliver can actually be delivered in the timeline. Folks within this product model, it's very common in other sectors to work in short 2-week sprint models, not months on end. The last thing I'll share, just we can manage this through the city charter. We need to regularly think, do the agencies have the personnel they need in the right titles to deliver services effectively, something called out merit and fitness and effective service
Let me
delivery.
stop there. Thank you
Sure,
so
thank
much,
you.
Rebecca. Thank you. David?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is David Sheldon. I am a retired organizer and business rep for Local 802 of the American Federation of Musicians. I am currently a public member of Community Board 1 Manhattan, dealing with waterfront matters. I am a member of Save Our Seaport, which is a grassroots organization committed to the preservation of the South Street Seaport Historic District for about a decade now. And I am an active mariner at South Street Seaport. You're talking to a sailor. Okay. I have, as you may imagine, participated in many meetings with the EDC, both as a community board member and as a member of the public in public engagement sessions. We have dealt with long-term planning for resiliency, Lower Manhattan. Of course, where I am, it would be Manhattan. You have the same issues here in Brooklyn, obviously. Dealt with more immediate concerns with the seaport and FIDI, very low-lying areas, and most recently with the use of the seaport's Pier 15. It has been my experience, together with that of many others, that public input at these events is largely, in fact, notoriously ignored. We have had convenings of maritime professionals ready and willing to give advice and direction on maritime use and facilities. That input has been ignored. I have talked with a colleague of mine, 25 years active mariner in the seaport, looking at EDC plans for Pier 15. He hung his head, shook it, and said, EDC is just going to do what they want to do. So, as a measure of efficiency, as a savings of both time and money, perhaps the EDC can just do away with the sham of public engagement. They are a waste of their time and ours. Let the EDC show up, show us all the pretty displays and PowerPoints, tell us what they're going to do it, and go home. Tremendous savings would be involved. Of course, in the long run, efficiency might better be served if EDC planning were actually informed by public input. There would be fewer sessions, fewer props and gimmicks, more real dialogue, which could produce a better result for our city. It could produce a waterfront with room for small-scale vessel operations, as well as for large commercial ventures that EDC favors. It could bring communities and maritime together across that waterfront. It could produce a waterfront that meets and is in accord with the concerns and needs of adjacent communities. It could create a waterfront and waterways that could now, as they always have, join our city together. So, summary, 2 points. Can EDC be made publicly accountable? And 2, would you consider the creation of a community board M, maritime, with delegates designated from each of the community boards that share a waterfront?
You're at time, David.
Thank you.
Thank you both, Rebecca and David. Questions from our commissioners? Please.
I just wanted to know if you worked during the Bloomberg administration in the city, and if you were familiar, because many of your recommendations are the same reasons that they tried to set up a separate entity, a nonprofit entity that could go outside the traditional civil service system and hire the right people.
I worked under the de Blasio administration, but one of the challenges is really how do we not create more opportunities to go around the system? How do we make sure that the system is working for the way that we want to be working today? How can we ensure that our agencies have the capacity to hire the people that they need, in this case, the technologists that they need, that match modern skill sets? And with that, can also build internally and can manage the vendors that we're contracting at very high amounts to do work on behalf of the city.
Yeah, I totally agreed with your analysis of the problem. It's just that I think that requires state action, a solution.
Some of these things may require state action. I think there's a piece, though, this current city charter connects the requirement for merit and fitness to effective service delivery. It's saying that our merit and fitness hiring program is what leads to effective service delivery. We don't have a mechanism to hold that fact accountable. And so what we really also need to be thinking about is when we're planning for these things, how do we learn about the changes that are needed? How do we use that as a basis to then make changes either to how we hire, how we deliver services, whether that's through employees or through the contracts that we hold.
But again, that would be require the state to affirm those changes.
For some civil service title changes, yes, but there is a lot of things that can be done at the city level. I mean, there's the mechanism by which we can even explain how civil service works in plain language and make sure that people have the opportunity, if they have these skill sets, to be able to be in the titles that they should be in. There's mechanisms and use of non-competitive and exempt titles, thinking about how we use those across the city as a stopgap as we think about moving towards this as well.
Thank you for those suggestions. Thank you both for your testimony. David, I respect your skepticism, but I appreciate that even through that, you managed to be solutions oriented and you have a vision for how we make progress. So thank you both. I'd like to invite Yvonne Lee and Ralph Yozo to testify. As Yvonne and Ralph make their way to the front, I want to remind all of us that I've noted at several turns that this meeting will conclude at 8 p.m. I know there are some of you that are still waiting and hoping to testify. I'll give this bit of encouragement to those of you who are testifying now. 3 minutes is a ceiling. It is not a requirement. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm Yvonne Lee. Good evening. And I'm here to talk about good evening, commissioners. My name is Yvonne Lee, and I am a lifelong New Yorker. 7 generations of my family was born in Harlem Hospital since 1919. Okay, so my name is Yvonne Lee. I live in Harlem, and I'm a lifelong New Yorker and a lifelong independent voter. I recently retired from Department of Housing Preservation, as a housing and community specialist. I really like that. We have a democracy crisis in our city, and I see it every day. So now I have more time to walk through the streets and talk to people. We have a primary election where us independents are locked out. It feels like we're being held hostage if we don't choose a party. I grew up watching these parties ignoring my community, so why would I want to still be in them? Okay. 1.2 million voters and young people are registered independents. I know I registered a lot of them over the years. And we know that most of our time in city elections, the decision that counts the most is the primary, because that's where you decide who's going to be on the ballot in December. So you have people not going to vote in November because they don't particularly like the people that's on the ballot. And we all know they're not going to do anything. They're going to have political amnesia the day after election day, which we've seen over and over again. So we need all New Yorkers. That's what democracy is about. All New Yorkers being allowed to participate in every election. We don't have to be a Democrat or Republican or independent, just registered voters, the primaries. That's the most important part of the election. And we need to be let in. We shouldn't be held hostage and demand that we do this and do that. Why? It's never worked for us before, so now why is it going to work for us now?
Thank you,
Okay,
Yvonne.
so, yeah. Oh, my time is up.
Thank-
Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Ralph.
And thank you. My name is Ralph Yazzo. I've been a lifelong New Yorker. I've served in Community Education Council in different areas, and I've worked in the private sector my whole life. I want to go back to the word efficiency. Efficiency also means possible cuts, right? I barely hear anyone talking about cuts. We won't have COGE if we don't talk about cuts, right? We'll have bloating, right, instead of efficiency, right? And I think everyone here should step back and look at the budget. The budget is growing exponentially. Exponential doesn't mean rockets to the moon. It just means it's growing at a percentage of its current value, right? So 6% of a dollar is 6 cents, but 6% of $100 billion is $6 billion. So if it keeps growing at its current rate, it's going to grow very fast. It's the curve of a hockey stick, right? In the beginning, it's small, but then it grows exponentially. If you look back at the budget just 20 years ago, it was microscopic to what it is now. And so I know we're not supposed to ask questions, but why is that happening? Why is the population of Department of Education pupils decreasing and the budget is still growing exponentially? Why? That's my question. And I also want to confirm or add to what other people have said, that we need real-time disclosure of contracts, hiring, deals. Did everyone know that salaries are completely disclosed on the New York City Open Data website? Has anyone ever even tried to use Checkbook NYC? Has anyone tried to make sense that one gentleman did mention something about the expense budget, and he's right. It goes down to a unit of appropriation, and that's it. And literally, they'll have a line in there that says lump sum, $6 billion. And the people are supposed to understand this. We should have monthly or weekly classes on what's going on. We have a community education council. We should have a community budget council. And I just have so many other things, but as the chairman said, we should yield time. So in the spirit of efficiency, I will yield the rest of my time. But thank you.
Thank you both.
Mhm.
Questions from commissioners? No questions. We appreciate your testimony. It is now 7:58 PM. I will invite testimony from two last participants, and I apologize again to those of you who hoped to be able to testify in person or online. I will ask you to all take the opportunity to submit your testimonies into the record, and we're terribly sorry that we can't hear from everyone, but we do have time constraints. So I'd like to invite Lola Starr and Sergio Marrero to join us, please. I can't apologize enough to those of you who have not had an opportunity to testify. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. And
My name is Sergio Moreau. I am founder of Rebel One, impact investor that supports tech founders building for social good. Formerly, I led Blue Ridge Labs, is the innovation unit of the Robin Hood Foundation, and echoing similar sentiments of what Andrew and Julie Samuels shared tonight. But for years, I've been working with founders who have built to serve low-income communities, build tech specifically for low-income communities. Propel, Claimant, Grouper, Alice, everything from SNAP to disability benefits. And sometimes the challenge really is they're building solutions and it's not the technology, it's they're having a difficult time working with the government institutions. And so I have 3 ideas to throw into the mix. One is a sandbox of some sort, so where they can actually deploy this technology and failure is part of the process, rather than a long rigorous process where it only gets assessed for the entire city. Like being able to deploy in an area and understand, iterate and really get to a working solution with community. Second is for those actually to be paid engagements and not run through the same RFP process, that these are paid, that they're able to, you're talking about 1 to 3 person organizations, they have solutions, and I have stories of founders that have built great solutions, tracking and automatically informing or reporting on landlords for not turning on the heat. And some of those founders, they just didn't get the contract or they couldn't, also build while testing at the same time and closing the sale. So the third is actually the city has done a great job with transparency, actually creating a place where some of the employees inside the government can share where things aren't working, so that like there's really passionate people willing to build outside, and you'd probably be surprised at who will come back and say, hey, here's a solution. And I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you for this opportunity. My name is Lola Starr. I'm a small business owner, artist, and community advocate from Coney Island. I am here because New York has allowed public land to be governed in a way that prioritizes private power over public benefit. Public land belongs to the people of New York, but too often decisions are made through systems that strip power from the communities who are forced to live with the consequences. For more than 20 years, I operated an independent business on the Coney Island Boardwalk. That business became a beloved part of the community and the Boardwalk experience. What I experience is not isolated. It reflects a broader pattern in how public land is managed in New York. No entity illustrates that more clearly than the New York Economic Development Corporation. NYC EDC controls vast amounts of public land and shapes neighborhoods redevelopments across the city, yet operates with very limited democratic accountability and strong allegiance to large-scale developers and private investment priorities. In Coney Island, the EDC controls the majority of the amusement district, and that corporate allegiance has had dire consequences. I'm going to skip some of my personal experience. The structural imbalance on public land, in both cases, public spaces I helped to activate became easier to displace than the private corporation's position to replace or monetize it. This is the pattern New York is failing to confront. Public land is being managed through systems that favor large corporations with capital, institutional access, and contractual power over the communities that actually create cultural and neighborhood value. This is not simply a development issue, it is a government issue. It is a failure of accountability. It is failure of democratic control over public assets. If the city charter is to correct that, it must include the following enforceable reforms. Public land transparency requirement. All leases, dispositions, and redevelopment agreements involving public land must be disclosed before finalization with time for public review. Community pre-approval standard. Major public land decisions should not be finalized until structured community review is completed and publicly documented. Independent oversight mechanism. Create an independent body to audit public land decisions and assess whether they meet public benefit standards. Small business protection requirements. Public land should be a place where local small businesses are allowed to thrive. Require impact displacement assessments for all public land projects, including mitigation plans for legacy tenants. Small business advocate.
You're at time.
Okay.
You could finish the sentence, that one sentence.
A small business advocate with enforcement authority.
Great. Thank you.
Chair, can I just say one thing? I just want to, Sergio, uplift Heat Seek, which is one of
That's
the
right. That's
organizations, which is the only way we knew when there was no heat in seniors' apartments, and Just Fix NYC, which is to this day the only way we know the entity, ownership entity behind many of our landlord buildings, including how government itself knows it.
Thank you, Brenda.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
I just have a quick one, Sergio. If you didn't already submit testimony, or if you can send us more real life examples on the pilots that you were talking about, would be terrific. And if you can say, even if you're not sure, which ones you think are charter, and you could say which ones you think are not charter, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll submit that.
Thank you both. And Lola, I'm going to make a confession to you. When I announced that we were closing on 8 p.m. and I would be shutting down testimony, you were so demonstrative in your disappointment that I decided to call on 2 other people. I did not know that you would be the beneficiary of that. So I thank you. So this concludes the opportunity to testify this evening. Again, my apologies to those of you who could not testify. If you wish to do so, you can do it in one of 2 ways. Either submit written testimony or RSVP to one of our other 8 upcoming meetings. Either can be done at nyc.gov/COGE. Thank you everyone who testified. Special appreciation for our stenographer, the staff at Brooklyn College, and our hard-working interpreter who made this an inclusive and accessible event. The next public hearing of the commission will be held next week in Queens. Next week, actually 2 weeks from now in Queens, on June 22nd at 5 p.m. at the Department of Design and Construction. So we thank you for that. That's at 3030 Thompson Avenue in Long Island City, Queens. I'd like to turn to the commission for a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion? Is there a second? All in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned.